Good morning. The meeting of the Monroe Township Board of Education will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
And I just want to apologize to the board for oversleeping today. I set my clock for 5 to 8 instead of 5 to 7. So thank God I have children that get up early. I'd be still sleeping. So I apologize to everybody. May we have a roll call, Mr. Gorski?
Mrs. Koloponowicz?
Here.
Mr. Chiarella?
Here.
Ms. Antelis?
Here.
Mr. Braverman?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman? Mr. Klein? Mr. Leary?
Here.
Mr. Masters?
Here.
Mr. Tesler?
Here.
Mrs. Ferroni? Madam Board President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. In accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, the Monroe Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted August 17, 2012, 1 at all schools, 2 Home News Tribune, 3 Cranberry Press, and 4 filed with the clerk of the municipality. At this time, we'll go to public forum. If there's anyone in the public who wishes to speak to the agenda, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. Okay, seeing no one, we will go to our topic number 6, review and set district goals. We need to set measurable district goals for this coming school year, and we are happy to have Gwen Thornton from New Jersey School Boards with us this morning to help us with this process. So,
Well, thank
Gwen?
you. Good morning. It's nice to see all of you on a Saturday morning, the last Saturday in summer. God bless you. Take this committed seriously. I appreciate your coming out to do that. One of the things that we routinely do with boards of education is to come in and work with them on developing goals for moving forward. And our focus, and your focus, I know, as a Board of Education, has been around looking at data to determine what those goals need to be. And so we just have a couple of slides that I just wanted to go over. I know that your commitment is to making sure that you are a district that meets the needs of every child, and that's no easy challenge, okay? And we really do believe that looking at your district as a complete system, not in parts, really taking a systematic approach to thinking about all of the component pieces and how they integrate and work will help you to accomplish those particular goals. And really what you want to do, it's really when you think about a system, there's really a cycle. So we're really looking today at where you are, that baseline. Where are you in terms of student achievement, your facilities, your enrollment, and looking at those things that impact it to make sure you've aligned your resources, your budgeting, your facilities, to make sure that you can support that. And then, of course, all of the things that come out of that support, your programming, your curriculum, your instruction, and then you assess at the end of the cycle where you are. What have you accomplished? What do your test scores look like? What's your graduation rate? And there are all kinds of softer accountability measures, not just your graduation rates, not just those really quantifiable pieces are important, but there are many others. And so where do you get the data to begin thinking about doing this kind of goal setting? Certainly your state-run school report cards, your classroom assessments, looking at your higher education, where are kids going off to school, what are our kinds of evaluation that we've done. You would look at your CUSAC report, you would look at No Child Left Behind, although you probably are aware that New Jersey applied for a waiver to ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is going to change the way we measure student achievement. No Child Left Behind is going to look differently moving forward in New Jersey from now on. CUSAC as well, they've streamlined that monitoring process from the state, so instead of having 5 district performance review areas, they have streamlined it down to 3. Finance and facilities, curriculum, and operations, I think? Operations, yes. Which includes everything else. So as a result of that, those are all the kinds of places that you would look for data. But this is a collaborative process. And you really need to have your educational leaders here, which you do, your business administrator for the finance facilities piece, and certainly your superintendent as your educational leader for all other component pieces, most importantly, student achievement. I mentioned a little earlier some of those softer kinds of data points that you might look at. We know that second to the quality of instruction that takes place in the classroom, the second most important factor for improving student achievement is school culture. And by school culture, I don't mean are you cultural. What we're talking about is establishing a safe, secure learning environment where students feel supported. So for example, if you were looking at your school climate, there are some softer data points you might look at. You might look at your suspension report, your violence and vandalism report, your bullying, intimidation, and harassment statistics. On a positive side of those data pieces, I would also look to see how many students are participating in co-curricular programming, in athletics and choir, in the fine arts, because we know that kids who are engaged in the school program beyond the classroom tend to have higher levels of achievement. So clearly there are all kinds of pieces of data that you can look at to determine how you are doing. And this is not really, the heading is cut off, I apologize. But you would look at them in all of these areas to make sure that you are supporting all pieces, your curriculum, the instruction, with the rollout of the Common Core standards, which have to be fully implemented. There have been huge changes to the curriculum, especially in language arts literacy and mathematics specifically. Also, as part of that waiver, I'm sure you have seen there's now a new proposal once again from the state that's actually in that waiver that the Fed approved, that we're going to go back to end-of-year courses. So beginning with this year's 5th grade cohort, kids currently in 5th grade, when they are freshmen, the HSPA, the High School Proficiency Assessment, will be replaced by 4 years of end-of-year course exams in mathematics, algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, and a 4th year of mathematics, and all 4 years of language arts literacy. So things are going to continue to evolve and change as we move forward. School culture, we talked a little bit about. Student support, your guidance services, special education, it would fall under that as well. Professional development is going to be key moving forward as well. I know you know that they're rolling out the new teacher evaluation model. This is a pilot year. It has to be fully implemented by September of 2013. Every single teacher and administrator has to be trained on that. It is a huge initiative. It's a costly initiative as well. So there's going to be, I think, a need for increased professional development, okay? So all of these pieces are what really impacts, and it's all in your folder. I don't want to take a lot of your time to do that, but I do want to talk about how you develop goals and what those goals look like and what the role of the board is in that process. This used to look a little bit more like the old Ballantine Ale commercials, and I'm probably dating myself. Those of you who are from New York or New Jersey remember the 7 rings. But what we're going to work on this morning are your district goals, and those are the goals that refer to the operation of your overall district. Boards of education typically have goals of their own that refer to their processes and procedures and how they operate. Those board goals around your processes and procedures generally come out of a self-evaluation. We would tell you that best practices after you have evaluated the superintendent, that you complete a self-evaluation, a self-assessment, look at how you have operated the past year, ask you to rate the board's performance, and then ask you to rate your own individual performance as a board member. The CSA goals that you see off to the right, the personal goals and leadership, those are the goals that belong solely to the superintendent. They are not evaluative in nature. They are professional development goals that come out of that evaluation for his or her professional development. Now we've added a new ring up on the top right as a result of the CAP law on superintendent salaries in New Jersey. Superintendents with new contracts are now allowed to have merit goals in their contracts, and so those are contractual and they're separate and apart from your district goals. Although in most superintendent contracts that now have them for merit, they obviously support the district goals. so that the work all aligns. And I would tell you that the board goals that are selected by boards, we encourage boards to select board goals that will support in a broad way the district goals. And the whole purpose of all of this process is to make sure that you have communicated your district goals to all of the stakeholders, to your staff, your principals, your educational leaders, and your community members, so that it drives the work of the board and your community is aware of what your focus is. Your district goals should drive the development of your budget. You can't establish a goal and then not provide the financial resources to the administration to support it, to be able to accomplish it. It should also drive your policy making and your decision making as a board. Many boards will actually put their district goals on the top of every agenda, so that as they're sitting at the board table making decisions, those decisions are made in light of, does this support our district goals and our focus for the year? So it ensures that once you have set the district goals, they then are communicated to the school buildings. The principals are made aware, supervisors and directors, and they make their staff aware so that the building goals of each school building align to the district goals, and then everyone is rowing in the same direction and working on the same pieces, okay? So as you begin thinking about developing district goals, what are the kinds of things that you really need to be thinking about? Most districts have a mission statement that generally speaks to the requirement and the need to make sure you're providing the educational programming. Kathy, what's your mission statement say, please?
The mission statement, the Monroe Public Schools, in collaboration with the members of the community, shall ensure that all children receive an exemplary education by well-trained, committed staff in a safe and orderly environment.
Thank you. Okay, so the goals you set need to support your mission statement. If you have a strategic plan in place, you would look at your strategic planning goals, which are generally 3 to 5 year goals, sort of those broader goals, and determine which of those you're going to focus on in a given year. Absent a strategic plan, then you look at your data and you look at your previous goals, what you achieved in the past year, and what's in progress. Very often in education, goals are multi-year goals. We're standing in the best example of a multi-year goal. This high school was not built in 1 year. It took multiple years of work and effort to get this facility up and going. So if in year 1 your goal was to get the referendum out there, to begin designing it, in year 2 it was probably to set out the contracts, get the construction going. Those kinds of things take 3 or 4 years. So very often the goals that you are setting are going to end up being multi-year goals. We know that making improvements in student achievement don't happen overnight. It takes time to implement the Common Core curriculum, to implement new programs, to purchase new technology that gets integrated by teachers into their classroom use. All of those things cost a lot of money and they take a lot of time. It doesn't happen overnight. So very often districts will have multi-year goals. And I'd like to begin talking about what your recent strengths and achievements have been. What did you accomplish this year? And where are you? What's in?
Yep, that works.
It sticks, so we're
Okay.
good. It's like a big Post-it. What are you most proud of?
We are most proud of the listing on last Sunday's Inside Jersey, where they were talking about the top 10 schools, high schools, based on the HISPA and advanced performance. And we were in that 10, and the interesting thing was there was only 8 comprehensive schools. The top 2,
We're magnets.
they were magnet schools.
I read it, I saw it.
And that I consider a very, very significant improvement. And we got into a little bit of a Donnybrook about that. I hope it went out on television and I'll get warm support among older people. Maybe children won't like it, but they will, and they'll recognize that we have a lot of balderdash out there in the audience.
About the successful opening of our high school and middle school. That's
I
true,
think
too.
another important thing is we were $13 million over adequacy, and through the efforts of staff, they brought it down by $5.5 million to $7.5 million. I think that is a great starting point for maybe a 3 or a 4-year glide path to get to adequacy.
Reduced by how much? Just give me that big number again.
$5.5 million, non-trivial accomplishment.
What else?
I just want to go back to the opening of the high school and the middle school, because it's not just the opening, it's the whole transition of moving one school to another, opening it up smoothly, and I think it's really just a little bit more than just opening the school.
Throwing open the doors.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the public sees. And that's the wonderful piece. The doors open, kids come in, and everything moves forward.
Thank you.
You all know what it took to get to that place in terms of logistics and planning and development and organization. Yes?
Giving the condition of limited funds are renovations of Applegarth School, all what we did over there.
And within the context of the agreed-to general fund budget,
Within the budget.
within the budget.
Not easy to do. What else?
Successful negotiations with all of our unions.
So you've completed
Yes.
negotiations with all the bargaining units. Wow, you guys have had a really busy year.
I look tired.
That's why I slept late today.
Should we do bragging, or should we hold our tongue?
You can
No,
brag. Go
I'm
ahead,
asking
brag.
you to brag.
That negotiation resulted in, when you combine salary with benefits, a 0 increase, while we're giving 2.25%, and 2.5% increases to the teachers over a 3-year interval. Through
Zero
a,
increase in the budget. Help me to understand what you mean. by
I'm talking about 0 increase in the general fund
that.
budget.
In the budget, that's what I said.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it also, through the innovative use of opting out. I mean, we have a lot of people here in this building who are teachers. The husband is a teacher in geometry and the other one is in biology. And we say, hey, we'll give you $4,000 if you walk away.
I know.
That saves us $18,000 right there.
Good thing. Anything else that you can think of? Yes?
Yeah, I think the collaboration between the board and the administration, I think that that's been a big one for us. I know that although it might not be visible to the public, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes where there's a lot of communication. I get calls from Dr. Hamilton or Mr. Gorski, during the week on various things, and there's a lot of talk about openness and transparency and how we best convey that to the public and those kind of things. So I think that's a good thing.
It is a very good thing. It's essential to a successful district, and I think ending up in the top 10 speaks to that, because it's a critical component. It doesn't happen in districts where that's not the case. It just simply doesn't.
The other thing is, put it in context. Middlesex is a growing
Today.
county. We are the second largest county. We have surpassed Essex County. So when you're talking about our county, 10 means you got to go quite a bit ways. Whereas if you're down south in Gloucester County or in Salem County, there are only 3 high schools.
Excuse me? Excuse me. I work in Gloucester County. There are more than 3 high schools.
Are there 10?
5. No.
I rest my case.
They're growing as well. Swedesboro Woolridge is the fastest growing township in the state of New Jersey. They are growing at a clip of more than 300 students a year.
Been there, done that, gone to 400.
I got one more.
Yes.
The High School Technology Initiative, I think that has to be mentioned. Breaking ground on a brand-new technology, leading edge.
I will get this all back to you in scribble that you can actually read. So if you can't read my handwriting.
We're in a one-to-one iPad learning environment at the high school.
Why'd you mumble that?
I didn't.
Because it's early Saturday morning.
It's 8:30 Saturday.
Anything else? Come on, I've had districts that have done 7 pages on this. Mike?
You mentioned CUSAC. We had another perfect audit and very good CUSAC scores.
If you're throwing all this stuff on there, we hired 2 new principals.
We got 7 more pages to go.
Yeah, I know. I'm working.
Only if
Can you write larger?
I could
Bigger
write
font,
bigger.
bigger font.
We were a pilot district for EE4NJ,
Yeah.
and that the staff has bought into that, so we're kind of ahead of the curve.
There are a lot of districts scrambling like crazy because it is a huge initiative, huge. And a sea change for staff, a real sea change. Colorado, interestingly enough, did their principals first, the switch to the new evaluation model. So they trained their school leaders and then they moved on to their teachers, which would seem to make more sense. You make the people who are your school leaders comfortable with the new model by doing it with them first, and then you roll it out to the teachers. But in New Jersey, we decided to do it in reverse. But who's counting? Anything else?
There's more. I was trying
I
to,
was gonna say-
I wanted to hear my board talk.
I know.
That's why I wasn't saying anything. Test scores. Our test scores are going up. We're seeing an increase in advanced proficiency categories. We've also been able to maintain the integrity of class size issues throughout the district, even with stringent budgets. In terms of safe and orderly, statistically, our schools are very safe and run very smoothly. Our discipline issues are relatively minimal in comparison. Our teacher retention, professional development is exceptional.
We're ready, our curriculum's all been rewritten for the Common Core.
I'm abbreviating because I know what the CC means. Yes.
We have such a good special education program. We have people specifically leaving Bay Ridge in Brooklyn and coming directly here because they want their autistic children to be taken care of.
Mixed blessing.
Sure is. Financially, it's a disaster, but it also talks about a very high-grade curriculum and a staff.
I'm just being funny because there are costs. Yes. Mike?
With assistance from the county, we were able to work out a collaborative tuition agreement with Jamesburg schools, who in the high school take up about 20% of our population.
I apologize. Hey, don't worry, you're pulling a leery.
I apologize.
I pulled the Leary, too.
Transportation efficiency rate.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, this coffee over there.
Where's mine?
Amy?
Another strength is we're able to work with the local government we have a very good rapport with them, collaboration.
Let me see. I'm going to stick these up here. Behind these poor tech people, I'm going to make them crazy. Okay. Sure.
I didn't get here till after 8. Yeah.
Don't feel.
I think the fact that we have a good percentage of our students involved in sports and clubs.
Accomplishments.
What did we do
Increase
last
in
year?
AP classes.
Or
and law
strengths.
courses.
Increase in AP and what?
Increase in courses, in advanced proficiency and honors courses.
Our AVID program is catching on like wildfire. AVID, A-V-I-D, all caps.
Which is?
College readiness system. It's a college readiness system, a college and career readiness system.
It's a new one, or a new name for,
No, it's a 30-year
Regular
program,
mark.
nationally and internationally.
it's not one I'm familiar with. I'll have to look it up. Anything else?
We have a data management system for student achievement, the MFR process, managing for results. That has been very instrumental in making sure kids are not falling through the cracks.
And truly, as this waiver rolls out, you're going to have to report more and more data around high school graduation, not rates, I mean, the rates change, so they figured that, but where they're going off to school, how many are staying, how many are taking remedial courses when they leave, and then how many are graduating within 5 years, all of that. So having this in place is going to really help you to be ready to.
And to that end, I'm on the advisory board to ETS, so we've already started those conversations. We have a partnership with ETS that helps us manage that data.
Perfect.
Bless you.
God bless you.
Bless you.
Yes.
At the high school, we offer a senior option program, which is a VERSE program that students can do teacher mentorships and internships and take college classes.
Credits, so that when they leave, they've already accomplished a great deal.
And one more thing before you go.
Not gonna let me go.
The first in the state to open an employee child care academy.
And something similar, the author.
That's a wow.
That is a
For your
wow.
staff, that's a wow. 100 years ago, when I taught, the biggest distraction I had was childcare for my children. So had I been able to have them, close by, that's huge from an employee perspective and teacher retention, staff retention. I'm sorry.
The special ed classroom that we've started.
The autistic class here at the high school, transitional class.
Continue the extended year program.
Extended year?
A preschool extended school year program.
You're gonna have nothing left to do. Don't you all wish? Yes.
The board also initiated several cost-saving strategies, saving about $750,000, including refunding over $100 million of bonds, saving $400,000 off the debt service levy every year going forward.
Then let's think about, now that you've looked at everything you've done, and I hope that you've taken the time as a board to think about this and to celebrate all of this, because that's really quite an accomplishment in a single year. You really should feel good about the kinds of things that you're doing. And it's nice to get that acclaim in an Inside New Jersey magazine, but more importantly, I think you should just feel good about the kinds of things you're doing for kids here.
That's
Because it's remarkable.
You know what, the truth of the matter is, we don't take the time to celebrate. Even this conversation and generating this list is long overdue.
Okay, and I mean that really sincerely, because what you do is important, and oftentimes, we don't take the time to sit back and say, what did we really accomplish this year? Look at all that stuff.
We need cheerleaders.
Well, you know what, given the wider sort of shifts culturally out there around education, I think it's really important to take the time to sit down and think about, what are we doing, what have we accomplished? And you have accomplished a great deal. So please try to, do this, absent anyone here, to just sit down and think about all of the kinds of things that you've done at the end of the year.
You should have heard what we heard on Wednesday from a bunch of know-nothings. People standing up and saying, I've lived in Monroe for 20 years, and this is the first Board of Education meeting, and then says, you've got a rotten school, and your money is out of control, you're a bunch of dumbbells.
Well, that's another reason why sometimes it's important to take the time to sit down, to go through this, and to think about everything you've accomplished, because it does communicate with the community. You know, while you may only see one aspect with your child in one school, they don't necessarily see the broader picture. If they only have a child, let's say, at the elementary school, or just a child at the middle school, they don't see the total picture, nor may they understand, perhaps, all of the component pieces that go into a successful operation of a district. The transportation, what it takes to open a school facility, what it takes to develop a budget, refinance the bonds, you know, bite every nickel and get every bit of value out of it so that it's going to kids and the focus is on education, which clearly it is. So I think sometimes we forget that we need to really do this on a regular basis. So as we think about all of these things, there are certain essential questions, and I think you've talked about it, about no child falling through the cracks. You've talked about some of the programs that are in place, that you have put into place the data systems you need to measure the assessment, and talk about aligning your financial resources. You've put into place a number of pieces to allow you to do that. But let's talk a little bit about perhaps what you've started and not yet had a chance to complete. What's in progress, what needs some additional attention, some additional focus in order to get it that extra way along, to really complete it.
We need to work on better collaboration with the community and various bargaining units. And communication across the district is another area.
Internally, externally, both?
Both.
Can you turn that chart a little bit, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. I'm sorry.
That writing is way too light.
Okay.
I have poor vision. One of my eyes is blind and the other has got about a quarter vision.
Okay, I will try to write bigger and write in black, sorry. Let me just read you what I wrote, and it says better collaboration with the community and bargaining units and communications in general, both internal among and between building staff, as well as external, which would be your wider community. And I'll write the next in black, so.
Thank you.
Yes.
Facilities, we still have facilities that need work to do. We need roofs, we need to continue to work on Applegarth.
Let's see how to say it. We have to respond to the tax, the impact of school taxes on our community.
Yes.
Expand on that. We've been spending and spending, raising property taxes, and really
Microphone,
heard.
please.
What was that?
Use the mic.
Microphone.
We can't hear you.
In order to accomplish what we've accomplished, we've been spending and spending and spending, in my estimate, with no consideration to what the impact was on property taxes. And finally, the bubble burst this year with the large increase. Now, our increase was small compared to past years because we used part of the referendum excess that we had to lower the school taxes, but the muni taxes went through the roof. So now, all of a sudden, you get a large group of people that have an organization that, and these are parents, these aren't the seniors, that said enough is enough. And yes, it's all well and good to put a new roof on one of the schools, and another school needs work. Applegarth, they complained about the amount that was spent over budget, but in reality, which went right over their heads, was it was no longer opening up one wing, it's opening up the entire school. And to be able to keep it within what we kept it at, I thought was phenomenal. But any initiatives that we come up with now, and from this time forward, we have to start cutting things and work within, I can't say work within, concentrate on cutting taxes. This 2% cap is phony. It's phony at the municipal government, and it's phony at the school board, because it's not a 2% cap, because it does not count salary, pension, and insurance. So that 2% cap is baloney. We should set a figure, and when we do the goals, we should set a figure that we're going to cut expenses this year 8%. Just come up with a figure. And that's what we have to work towards, is get rid of the fluff that we don't need and work towards giving these taxpayers true tax relief.
Gwen, I have to respond to that. About the third or fourth item, I set a glide path. We've already reduced the adequacy from 13 million down to 7.5 million. And over probably a 3-year interval, maybe 4, I don't know, that has to be worked out with staff. We get to adequacy. When we're at adequacy, we can go after these people with a tomahawk and really go and say, okay, we've chopped a lot of skin and we even chopped some bones, but now it's time to give us $30 million and quit giving us less than 3.
The finance piece is a very real issue,
That's their backstop. Every time you ask for it, they say, hey, you're out of adequacy. Well, we've demonstrated we can come down, and, Mike Gorski and the superintendent and all the other staff have been doing a financial Houdini act and have squeezed and done everything within the confines of a statute and the administrative code. And every one of those expenditures that everybody says is out of control down at Applegarth was reported every month as adjustments. And I'm the chairman of the finance committee, and I reviewed those things, and I'm perfectly prepared to take anyone on anywhere, anytime, any place.
Okay, John. How about,
Sorry,
how
I didn't
about,
hear you.
Watch it on TV.
how about dealing with the student growth?
You ready to say that?
His now.
We're even.
When within that student growth, this community's gone rural to suburban relatively quickly. There's a real increase in diversity of different cultures into the district, and I don't know if we've adequately addressed all their needs or helped them assimilate to our community.
So in that switch from rural to suburban, you've added to the diversity of the student population.
And if you need any justification, just look at the distribution at Oak Tree School.
Increasingly diverse students, they come with increasing needs.
Something that's, oh, I'm sorry.
So if we're talking about increased focus
Yes,
and where we're going,
great.
I think I'd like to see a suspension of new academic programs and tweak what we now have. And I think we have to have a concerted effort to do something about our facilities. Our facilities are getting old. Case in point, our artificial turf is 10 years old and it's now out of warranty. It cost us $1.5 million when they first installed it. I can't imagine what the price will be now.
So it's not just your facilities, it's the whole physical plans
Absolutely.
of all of the buildings, in addition to the roofs, it's the broader, so I'm gonna add that up here.
I think it should be at the top.
How much is grass seed? Grass seed?
The other thing, Gwen,
Plant
is.
seed over top the turf.
It's like $8.
It actually belongs on both lists, frankly. We've done a lot of work with closing the achievement gap between special ed and general ed,
Okay.
but there's more work to be done.
And those are the only two subgroups currently?
Oh, no, I can talk about more.
So among subgroups?
Right.
Okay, no, I just wanted to clarify, it was just, I wasn't asking for data off the top 10. Anything else that's progress that you want to address?
Well, there's one more thing if I'm, well, let them go, I'm sorry.
Although we talked about test scores and they have gone up, we've had more students move to proficiency and advanced proficiency. I think we have more progress to go there to get where we want to be.
I just want to hear you again. You want to move,
Still, moving our test scores up,
It's
keeping
moving,
going up, moving our test scores and student achievement up. HESPA's and New Jersey Act and other standardized tests.
well, New Jersey Ask disappears 2000, you're saying 14, 15, to be
Yeah.
replaced by PARC. But it will be the same thing. Well, it will be a different
serve the same
assessment.
purpose.
It will serve the same purpose. It will be a different instrument. It will also be given solely, we're told, through the use of iPads and other kinds of computer tablets and so forth. So having sufficient backbone and hardware, software available in order to make that happen is going to be critically important to be successful. So that's coming as well, but you will still have partially proficiency assessments will be different. The other good piece will be that we will get that results back, they're telling us, within about 10 days to 2 weeks, which will then allow teachers to take that data and really use it to inform instruction. So they could do an item analysis to see if certain students have missed certain concepts in almost real time, which will allow them then to differentiate instruction. Let's say I missed fractions, as a student. The teacher will know that, and they can develop some specific work for me to make sure that I do get fractions and I don't leave the third grade without having learned those fractions.
And
That's the good news.
And you know what, Gwen, while you're talking, I know I said it yesterday to the principals, you're never a prophet in your own land. What you just described, we're really in a very unique position, because that's exactly what the MFR process does. It gives our teachers the opportunity to assess that data before the end of the year and identify where those strengths and weaknesses are and what particular strategies need to be utilized to move kids across the continuum. And that's really how our test scores have been going up.
And that's a wonderful piece to have in place. We'll go here and then there. Yes?
The education movement seems to be moving away from the cohort results.
Correct.
Okay, which makes life easier for us because of the technology. How do we keep moving ahead in the test scores, which everybody sees, and yet be able to fulfill the needs of an individual student that isn't expressed in the cohort results?
Well, one of the pieces that New Jersey is going to is looking at a growth model. And every student individually, every child has his own or her own student identification number. The staff have them, so you're going to be able to look at.
Yes, but let me respond to that.
Okay.
How will we be able to report that when, on the other hand, the superintendent's merit increase is based on the big picture
Right.
of the big results?
And I think you're going to end up reporting both. One One for the broader purposes, and hopefully the second, the individual student piece, for teachers that will inform their work. Do you know what I'm saying? In other words, I think
Yeah.
we're gonna use those standardized assessments with cohorts to look at, you know, this many proficiency.
What you're saying is politicians shouldn't be running the school district.
Amen. I have no other, I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but it's, at the current point in time, unfortunately, we have to live with the reality of what we've got. Yes.
Gwen, I'll make a comment. I get very disturbed. I've spent a lot of time in my life doing financial analysis, and I want to have consistent numbers. And it's the old switch and bait game. They got the 3 shells up front, and they got the pea in their pocket. Every time you come along, boom, another whole set of numbers come along. And so you can't get any kind of consistency, you can't understand any trends, and it's a lot of balderdash. Notice that was very carefully
On that-
chosen.
I like balderdash.
Very good. Balderdash was good.
On those,
That's better
on
than
that-
some of the others you
the
used.
board's feeling a lot of fatigue and frustration on one big issue of state aid funding. We're grossly underfunded in state aid. And what was not identified in the previous public meeting was that state aid can go 2 ways. Yes, you could spend it on additional programs and services, or you could directly offset the tax levy with it. If we received our fair funding, it would be about another $5 million, and
Offset the tax rate.
that could have had a decreasing effect on the tax rate this year from the school portion. So we need to do what we can on that front.
Keep fighting for
And that may
it.
be, you know, an area where you might want to think about developing a board goal around advocacy, to really work, to change the way the funding formula is applied. Now, you know, we've been debating that in New Jersey for as long as I've been alive, practically. I know it can be a study in frustration. You know, we've never fully funded, the SUFRA 2008 was never really fully funded. You know, we still have the court decisions sort of hanging over regarding were once known as ABBOTS, but are no longer really ABBOTS, and the disproportionate allocation of funding in that direction. So it's going to continue to remain a challenging time. The state economy, you know, the numbers were not great this month. We had the highest unemployment rate, you know, one of the highest unemployment rates in the nation. So Jersey comeback is coming back, but albeit slowly, certainly a lot slower than all the politicians would like us to think and understand. And until that economy really comes back, the revenues are down statewide. You know, I just was listening to 101.5, which I try not to do on my way down in the car, because on the weekends they play music, it's a lot safer. But they had a newscast on, and it was talking about Revel in Atlantic City being in great difficulty. Now that, you know, just brand new, just opened, there was a lot of state money.
I'm going to help them out in October.
Yeah.
I'm going to personally
More
make
people.
to support them.
And in that
So
way,
I
then
think
we
that's
need to
important.
find ways to generate revenue. Now that, you know, some of the regulations have been laxed in ways of pay-to-play, advertising, taking over programs, even if it means, you know, charging for busing in certain instances. But I think that we really need to take a serious look about generating revenue, since the state's not going to give us any.
Right, they just finished, finalizing the regulations around advertising for busing. And there are some districts that are moving toward that, again, as a way, you know, it's not gonna get you gazillions, but anything is a help. So you may want to really think about that.
I agree with looking at ways to generate more revenue, but I also agree with Marv about putting a hold on new programs, what he said. And I also think we need to continue looking at the budget during the budget cycle and taking a look at maybe some programs or some things we offer that, you know, we could cut and wouldn't impact a lot of students. There may be some classes we offer that, although it's really nice to have, that in this economic environment, you know, we may want to rethink that. If you have a class that has 3 kids in it, you know, we'd love to offer it, or maybe there's less expensive way of offering it, maybe something online or things like that. So I think we start to need to review maybe some of our classes and some of our co-curricular programs and not increase any over the next few years, and maybe see if there's some things that we could, that are not working so well, or maybe that a lot of students aren't taking advantage of, that we can cut to offset taxes. So there's two ways to control the taxing. We can make more revenue and cut. So I think we have to do a little of both.
Well, and sort of piggybacking on that, then we really as a board have to start sticking to the budget. If an item is put in the budget and everyone agrees on it, just because you're pressured by a couple of parents, you can't keep flip-flopping and saying, oh, let's rescind it. And we've done that a couple of times on this board. And that's the kind of thing that needs to stop. Whatever's in the budget, it stays in the budget. We can't keep giving into the pressure of the public. You know, as I was saying, when we cut that class with 4 or 5 kids and they show up here, you got to stick to it. We got to stick to it and say, we're really sorry, but this was in the budget. We had a process where you had a chance to talk about it. People come to us and say, well, I didn't know. I wasn't at that meeting. Everything's advertised. We have to stop flip-flopping decisions, and that's a real issue on this board.
And that deals with communication too, because we have to find a way to communicate to these people that this is what's happening, and once it's finished and we make the decision, we're not going to change it. So that's
That's a tough part of boards, but one of the things about either having a strategic plan or very firm goals is you can point to them when they're here and say, you know what, we would love to add another, level of lacrosse to the school district, or we'd love to add another choral singing group. But here's our focus, and while we hear you, and maybe perhaps in subsequent years we'll be able to look at it, we just cannot do it this year. It's not within our focus, it's not within the budget, and it's hard sometimes to say, no, I get that. They show up and they're cute and they're little. I went to one board meeting once, they brought every little kid under the age of 7 in their soccer outfit. 300 of them, okay? It's hard, it's really hard, and you know half of them, right? Because they're your friends, your neighbors, your staff. It's hard, but you have to hold the line. Yes?
Going back to the state funding, something that is not said, and Michael has the information. When they made the original, first of all, let me start off by saying this district never received their fair share. According to the state constitution, as the state is responsible for providing free public school education to all children of the state. And that is not the case in this district. So let's start off by saying it wasn't only Christie's cuts. We never received.
No, I wasn't.
No, I'm not making it political. What I'm saying is, we've never received what we should have. The year that they made the cuts, they forced us, and Michael will know the terminology, to spend down
They took your surplus.
the surplus.
They took your surplus.
Now they're doing the same thing with the municipal government.
Yeah.
Now they want to go after the COA funds.
Yeah,
So they
the
can balance their budget, and the hell with what goes on with the municipal government, what goes on with the school board. They take that emergency money away, and when we have to put roofs on the schools, or we have to put a new boiler in, where does that money come from? They don't give us anything.
John, I'm sorry, Mark. That year when we lost $4.4 million of state aid funding, about $4 million of that got pushed into the general fund levy, because the timing was such with that information of that severe of a cut that to eliminate $4.4 million of the budget at that point in time was almost impossible.
Right.
So it was a shifting of the burden from the state to the local tax levy, which hasn't reversed yet.
And then what about the 2
Should've done
years?
this when they did my
where,
evaluation.
and then I'll shut up. There were 2 years where we have our budget, it's approved by the state, and then they beat us out of the last payment of $500,000 2 years in a row. So here you build your budget based on what the state is gonna give you, and then they renege, they say, well, you don't need the money, we're gonna go give it back to in those days, the Abbotts or Title I schools.
There's a 20th state aid payment that goes back at least 7 years that they took, that they never made up. I was on my board, and they took away the 20th state aid payment. They just didn't make it, because they needed it for Medicare, Medicaid money, so they
From
the state-
education.
and they never made it up. And I said to one of our elected officials, I said, will you talk to my bank so I can only make like 11 mortgage payments? And we'll just tell them, I can't make the 12th this month, this year. Just forget about it, and I'll pay it, you know, somewhere down the road when I get ready. So,
That'll go like a lead balloon.
well, it didn't.
The sheriff will be at the door with a foreclosure
Well,
notice.
I made the payment, believe me, but it is challenging, yes.
I think Dr. Hamilton may have mentioned it already, but I think we need a better way of communicating with the public with regards to what the unfunded mandates do to us, what the impact is on our budgets and on our programs, and also what the impact is of new developments and things like that are going on in town that, you know, we're looked at as, oh, well, we keep increasing the tax burden, but yet we're really just responding to an influx of children that are coming in because of new developments and things like that. And I think we have to do a better job of letting the public know where that burden is coming from and how we have to respond to it, and that we can't budget into the future for that impact. We have to deal with it as it's going on, and that sometimes makes it look like we don't know what's going on and we're just dealing with things and we can't look forward because we can't really budget for a development that we don't even know is coming, and then all of a sudden it's approved and we're getting saddled with new children coming into the school district.
There are a couple of pieces around that. New Jersey's one of the few states that does not permit or require developers to contribute either open space and/or dollars for the creation of facilities or an impact fee, you know, because you may now need another ambulance, or you need another fire truck, or you need another police car, or whatever it is. And New Jersey doesn't have any allowance for that. In fact, it's illegal. But one of the things you might want to consider, and a lot of boards have done in communities where there are growing, like here, is to ask that to be part of the planning board, so that you have on a real-time information regarding what's on the drawing table. It may not have been approved yet, but at least it won't be catching you, you know, completely off guard. And that's very helpful, because to have that kind of ongoing dialogue, and it's anticipatory, you know, and even with municipal services, you don't need a police car for every new development, perhaps, or a new fire truck. You do need a seat for every child that comes out of that development or the new housing. So, you know, it's difficult, and additionally, it's not even necessarily just new housing. When your homes turn over, because you do have a good school system, I'm sure that in large part some of your growth is coming if people are aging out of their homes and moving on, you know, whether it's to Florida or just to another development in town that's an over 55 or whatever, because they don't need the space. I'm sure they're selling those homes to people with children, so you're not even, you know, you're replacing and maybe even growing there as well. So I think that those things are, you know, unfunded mandates and the continued growth, the enrollment projections are a challenge.
When there's an important difference. Our next door neighbor, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the school board doesn't look at planning boards or zoning boards. They are an active participant. They've got the right to say no, or here's our requirements. In this state, we have to go in on bent knee and ask if we can observe, and that's got to be corrected. I mean, we have seen it. I mean, you know, 400 students, bang, year over year for what? Almost 10 years, right, Kathy? Mm-hmm. Right now, it's calmed down. Now it's going at the rate of about 200 per year, but in the high school, it's 100 per year.
And that's directly tied to the economy, because fewer people are coming and going. There's less ability.
Nobody can sell their
to
house.
move from your townhouse to a regular house, or from a small house, you know, starter home to the next house. Yeah. So people are moving, you know, there's less mobility because of the housing market. In some communities, if you have a good relationship with your municipal officials, and if you do, it's a wonderful opportunity to see if you can get a board member appointed to the planning board. That is not prohibited. So you could indeed do that if your municipal officials would be amenable to that. A board member can sit on the planning board. We had a board member on the planning board in my town.
Next door neighbor.
Because of that, yes. Mark.
I serve on the zoning board, and I've been on the zoning board even before I was on the school board. But I and another member of my community attend all council meetings, most of the planning board meetings. And what I have done, and everybody here will attest to it, is that I try to keep our board informed as to what plans are as far as homes. And the SALO Act was passed 2 years ago, and that was only for the builders, as the Abbott decision was. It was only to protect the builders. And what the SALO Act allowed was, if a PRC, Planned Retirement Community, is approved, and of course,
Bless you.
bless you, whether you serve on the zoning board, depending on what's needed to get it approved. If it's in the right zone, you know, then they can do it on the planning board. If you have to get variances, they come in front of the zoning board.
I know that.
And when they would come up with a PRC, of course you would pass it. There's no impact on your schools, so you have more money coming in to pay for your schools, so of course you would pass it. So you had Hovnanian and you had McDade, had two. One was done by the planning board, which was Hovnanian, and the McDade application was done through the zoning board. We'll talk Hovnanian. Hovnanian's original plan was 300 and some odd PRCs, Planned Retirement Communities. Under SALO, it stated that if he did not take a deposit, he's entitled to request a conversion to a family community. Now, mind you, the man did, other than the presentation he made in front of the planning board, showing what the homes are gonna be and what blah, 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 meant nothing. He never made any attempt to sell it. Waited out 2 years, 2.5 years, this act is approved, and he applies for conversion. So if it's 300 and, round figures, 325 families at an average of 2 per, there's a school in itself. Well, I testified as a resident in that community, in that application. And I brought up the bit about the impact on the school population. The law is written where you can't use it as a reason to turn it down. The outcome was that with the information I provided, it was voted down. They came back with a counteroffer where only 120 were going to be family homes. With McDade, it went the other way. I had to recuse myself, so the people who were on the zoning board approved it. That was 130 homes. It's going to be minimum 260 kids at build-out. Where do you put them? And the state government, they come up with laws for private interest groups with no consideration as to what goes on in your communities.
Yes.
Well, in adding to that, and which is what I wanted to say all along, with our growing population, not just facilities maintaining them, but where are we going to house our students in the next few
And
years?
who's gonna pay for it?
Exactly.
And
You
sure
know,
as
do
hell's
we
not
need
gonna
to
be the
build a
state.
new elementary school? Do we need to add on to the high school? Do we need to add on to other different schools? So that's
Or
going to.
all of the above.
Exactly.
Now, wasn't it also true that when you were filing for the referendum for the new high school, they only
Yes.
allowed you to project 5 years? Is that correct? You
Well,
couldn't project 10 years for
Well,
population
we do
growth.
have, we added a piece that we could add on to that high school.
No, but what I'm saying is, according to the New
He
Jersey,
is correct.
State
Yeah.
of New Jersey, you're correct, only allows you to look
To
at
build out for 5 years.
5-year enrollment.
even though
projections.
you know within 10 years, that population can more than double, you're locked into an inadequate size school.
Right.
That's why we're
I have one
reactive
more,
rather
totally
than
different one.
proactive.
Yes.
I really think we need to keep moving forward with the technology initiative and expand that. So I think long-term, that's going to actually help us out as a district. It's really well said.
How much did he pay you to say that?
You see my new iPad?
Jeff, I can't believe, Jeff just, he went like, oh, thank God.
I think we were making progress on the communication piece, but I think we need to increase our progress on communication, especially during our budget hearings, because I think if we put out information, let's say next year, if we decide to make some big cuts to some, like last year, we did the busing, and the previous year, we did the pay-to-play, not gotten to the situation in August. If we put those things out, I know we talk about them in our budget meeting, but if we just put them out any means possible on the, I know we do it on the website, but send notices out to the school and stuff like that, that these are the big things we're looking at cutting or something like that. You know, like if we told the students or sent a flyer out, or told the parents we sent a flyer out last March or last February saying this is what we're looking to cut in the buses, that we wouldn't have people yelling in August. You know, I think we need to work, especially around the budget time, increase the communication if we're looking at big changes in the budget, to communicate that out to the parents.
And I think you need to do that year-round.
Yeah, it's year-round.
We could probably save between $750,000 and $1 million if the local municipal government that we said gets along so well with us would build sidewalks.
Yeah.
Our transportation could be cut by that much. However, our local government kisses the behinds of the senior citizens here because they vote. An example of that is they just borrowed $20 million to build a senior center in a township where probably 90% of the seniors have their own senior centers.
A clubhouse within their retirement.
And
community.
also to build an expansion on the library, which will someday be a museum because nobody's going to use books.
That's a very scary thing.
Not if Jeff has anything to do with it, nobody's gonna use books.
We have a,
You're right, you're right.
we have a huge
Pick on
challenge.
Jeff.
We have a huge challenge, and I think I probably feel the pressure of this challenge more than anyone. And that is the obligation to create an appropriate balance between those things that we've listed here that we're so proud of, that pushed our schools into the top 10 in the county, and the outcry from the public to reduce the tax impact. There's almost an inherent contradiction to create that kind of balance. So on the one hand, we're so proud of all these things that are really, really working, and then on the other hand, we're tasked with deciding which of these things we have to reconfigure in order to reduce the burden. And the truth of the matter is the state is our enemy. Because if we
Absolutely.
got our funding, we would be able to accomplish both things.
Right.
And so we have to figure out, how do we have that battle? How do we create this balance? And then how do we respond to our public?
Yeah, what's the priority list?
I agree with the superintendent.
Absolutely.
And the more important thing is, Ira, we are caught in a time trap. A major element in the whole setting of the budget is, when does the state give us the numbers? And they give us 2 days, 3 days notice, and you said, well, hey, we've got to have a long lead time? I mean, we can talk generalities, but we can't talk specifics until the 11th hour and the 56th minute, and here comes midnight banging away, and we have...
And what do we have to cut?
and-
What do we have to cut out of the budget?
And, you know, it's a rotten system, and we have to go and highlight to the public where the problems are. And I think we have elements where we can go out and demonstrate to the public that we have done a remarkable job of financial stewardship, and at the same time made major advances in curriculum and in student performance. And we should do that again and again and again. Let's get aggressive. Don't be a punching bag.
I'm going to terminize, and this is going to be wrong, but the terminology is going to be wrong. The joke is, in private industry, and I was always in sales and management, if you were successful and you went over your quota, you were rewarded, you received a bonus or a promotion. But when it comes to education, okay, and you are reaching, the whole idea of education is to get a child that's here to reach for here. The one who's here to reach to here, always reaching, especially the way the world economy is today. You want top of the top, you want the best educated kids. You don't want to leave anybody behind. So if a kid is here and you can only get him to here, you get to the max. We, being over adequacy, we get penalized. Here we are, a successful school district, on the backs of our taxpayers. Probably 97 to 98% of the budget is picked up by the taxpayers, and we're being hammered by the state, and we're successful. And what my true feeling is like they always say, well, we're bringing up the level of education of the low performing children to get them closer to the high-performing children. Well, why don't we tell the truth? We're lowering the high to here to bring these kids up to here. And that's baloney. You want these kids to be successful, whether they go continue on to college, or they go into the military, or they go out into business. You want them to have the best education and the best chance to succeed, and this state is totally against that. And you're penalized.
I can't argue with you. I can't argue with you. You districts that spend over adequacy, that are doing a remarkable job, are penalized. Believe me, I get it. And I love hearing that in spite of all of that, you still really want to do the right thing. Because I think trying to maintain that balance between quality and fiscal efficiency and responsible stewardship is always going to be a challenge. So, yes.
Real quick, we're on a great roll, but I'd like to make a motion for a 10-minute recess.
I'll second it. And 6 cups of coffee.
Everybody's just been getting up and going anyway.
I only have one kidney, as you well know.
You've identified your strengths. You've talked about all of those pieces that are in progress. So when I look at those, I've tried to sort of identify the broader areas that all of those pieces encompass. And I think a lot of them sort of fall neatly into a couple of different buckets. We talked a lot about communication with your parents, with your community, with municipal officials. We talked about alternative revenue sources and developing partnerships. I think those, Grandma's here, those alternate, aren't they cute? Those, I'm sure they're adorable. Those business partnerships and community partnerships might lend you some additional revenue as well as generate some positive interest. There's the whole issue around instruction, student achievement, continue raising and moving every child up. The area of facilities, renovations, looking at your growing enrollment. Do we need more facilities, different facilities? What do we do long-term? Technology. The one we didn't really mention so much is the arts, and I'm going to ask Dr. Hamilton to perhaps comment a little bit on that.
I can do it real quick. With all the work we're doing, it is very easy to lose our fine and performing arts in this big picture. And I want to make sure that we have a commitment to maintain those arts, culinary arts, graphic arts, performing arts, all those things that create a vehicle for those youngsters who are not going to be our academically gifted and talented students, so to speak, but those youngsters who may have an aptitude in some other arena. We don't want to lose them. And I think if we don't focus on that as a priority, it could be one of those areas that falls through the cracks.
And it's because with all of the accountability measures, there's been so much compacting of the curriculum for expansion of instruction in the area of language arts, literacy, and mathematics, which are important. I'm certainly not discounting their primacy, but what you do in your schools is so much more than just simply language arts, literacy, and mathematics. Right. And for large numbers of students, it is the fine and performing arts or culinary arts that gets them to come into school to be able to get the language arts, literacy, and the mathematics, or it's the co-curricular program that keeps them engaged in school. Those are so important.
One of the things why they're coupled is because we believe that the technology is the vehicle to the output of the creation of the arts in a lot of ways. So to put it, not separate them.
We'll go here now.
I think that Dr. Hamilton makes a great point in that I think the senior option is also something that's very important, and those living skills, but the arts and we're living in a different economy now. I don't think anyone knows what's coming. I think that we could very well be in a position in a few years where maybe everyone going to college is not the norm anymore, and we need to be able to gear up to satisfy those needs and bring our children through whatever avenue they need to get through in order to be successful, successful individuals later on. So I think having all of those programs still active also helps us to be able to maneuver when we need to maneuver.
Exactly what the superintendent said is absolutely correct. What you have, I think the failure of many districts in failing many of their children is the fact that they think that they're teaching the children to be college material. In other words, everything's leading to, every kid's going to go to college. Well, you have a segment of the population that's not going to go to college. And if you're going to key all your subjects to building them for college and not give them the well-rounded background of using technology, of the arts, in this case, culinary arts or woodworking or what have you, then we're leaving that segment of student out of the process, and I think that's been a failure, elsewhere.
Well, and it's interesting too, because in large part across the state of New Jersey, there's been an evolution in the last decade, or maybe slightly longer than a decade, and you certainly can speak to this, where the vocational technical schools that used to provide that kind of programming have evolved into academic magnet schools with a focus on either STEM or fine and performing arts. Some of them have them.
Yes.
But they have closed down a number of what we would consider the vocational kinds of programming that offered real alternatives to students. And I have some districts in some of my counties that can't get kids into those programs, the vocational programs, or students who really want to be in vocational programs. Clearly that's their intent. They no longer have the enrollment capacity because so much of their capacity has shifted over to, and that's not true in Middlesex, but in some of the other counties across the state, it's absolutely true. They have shifted over into these magnet academic programs that are sometimes more high-performing, in quotes, than their local high school.
Very high performing.
So they are creating difficulties with maintaining programs at the comprehensive high schools, and they're creating problems for students who wish to be in vocational technical programs because they have chopped those back in order to provide these other programs. So it's really very interesting, this sort of evolution, and I think it's directly tied to No Child Left Behind, because vocational technical schools were charged with meeting all of those same requirements of testing as No Child Left Behind, and they couldn't, so they had to find a way to make adequate yearly progress, and so they shifted their focus. So I think that may shift back to your point, so that there are those opportunities. We'll go here and then we'll go there. Yeah.
I think one thing moving forward, expanding upon that a little, when we look at student achievement, I know we talk about one of the statistics we look at is what kind of colleges our students are going to, the percentage are going to four-year colleges. I think we have to, given our economic environment and how costly it costs to go to four-year colleges, I know because my daughter's starting next week, I think we have to be careful in looking at that data, because a lot of our students may be able to get in these four-year schools and these really good schools, but they decide to go to the community college just because they can't afford it, not because they're not capable of getting into it. And a lot of students go to that route and transfer to four-year college. So I think we have to, I think we're doing that already, but that's something we need to track too as part of student achievement.
The county colleges, the county system is really 2 years at a county college with an associate degree, saves you a great deal of money. You transfer to the other institution, and you have saved a bundle. So that if you want to go on to
That's what they're
go to
doing.
graduate school, you've saved those 2 years of undergraduate, the huge chunk of tuition. It's still costly, no doubt about it.
People look at our district, I think they have to look at the colleges that our seniors are going to a little more carefully. It's not because they can't get into these really top colleges. It's because they can't afford to go into them.
That's why there's a lot of kids now who take a year off and work so that they can pay for college,
Right,
because
that too.
parents are having
So,
difficulty doing that.
Just because a lot of Monroe students aren't going to these top colleges may not be because they can't get
Well,
into them.
and one of the pieces to the New Jersey Smart and to the data collection will help, I think, the district be able to track that, so that you can look at those who stay in state, do 2 years at county colleges and institutions, and then transfer, so you'll be able to say to your community, yes, you know, these were financial decisions, but these children went on.
Exactly.
And earned degrees from blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Because it really is, it makes good sense. I said to my kids, I wish I'd thought of that, you know, save me a bundle, yes.
I have a step-granddaughter who goes to this school, and the culinary arts program in this school is remarkable. I mean, I'll give you a simple example. I'll stack her up making tiramisu with any restaurant that I've seen in Middlesex County.
But you didn't bring it.
Okay, but hey, today is a Sweet 16 party.
Okay, all right, next time I
But,
come.
so the point I want to
tiramisu,
make
I'm
is
coming.
that it's not necessarily the county college, it's not necessarily a four-year college. She may be going to Johnson Wales.
Or
And,
CIA.
and hey, she's a smart girl and she's got great work habits. I have no doubts that she could do very well as a chef.
Yes, and then we're gonna move on.
Let's go back again to the failure. The failure in this state is the state government. Just look at Rutgers. My daughter, when she graduated East Brunswick High School, applied and was accepted to Rutgers and other top schools, Penn State, University of Michigan, so on and so forth. Do you know that she was able to attend, and she wanted Penn State, which at that time I was very happy, but she attended Penn State, and it cost me less money to send her to Penn State being out of state than sending her to Rutgers, and I'm going back now, oh, she's got to be out of school 15 years? Now it's even worse.
Right.
So your quality students, if they were not able to get a scholarship to Rutgers, they were going to other states because it was cheaper. And exactly
They
what
just
Ira said is, that's why a lot of these kids are going to the two-year schools, to save that money.
Just another closing thought on the arts. The other reason that I thought in conversations even with our principals that we needed to make sure we kept the arts in there is we have this facility that has this incredible performing arts center in it. It's centered around the arts, the culinary arts program. Kids will leave here and really be able to go right into the workforce. The building, and now the middle school that's in the old high school building also has access to those facilities. So it would actually be irresponsible of us not to maintain the integrity of the arts when kids have these incredible facilities at their disposal.
That's wonderful to have those available to make use of them. Okay, so what I would ask you to do, and I know it's sort of a convex or a concave, whatever, around that column, to sort of look at all of those areas you've identified and see if we can't come up with some meaningful district goals to address those areas that are in progress where you need to. And if you look at this, you know, the current initiative piece goes to the state aid funding, goes to the alternate method of generating revenue, goes to the budget review of current programs, you know, to see if we can take something off the plate or shift those dollars somewhere else. The unfunded mandates, you know, that's a budgetary item, but I'd like to tell you something's going to happen with that. You know, I'm not holding my breath. You know, to me, in large part, while you were a pilot district for EE4NJ and received some funding to help implement that program, the cost for doing that for districts that did not receive any pilot money it is going to be a huge chunk out of their budget. And to me, it's a huge unfunded mandate. Not a bad one, not a bad idea necessarily. I'm not commenting on that. But just the cost to doing it is a huge piece. So you also have, I think, under that budget piece, the facilities, you know, how do you deal with those growing enrollment? If that's a finance issue, it's also an education issue, but you're gonna have to sort of solve that the same way. To respond to the tax impact on your community, to your piece, you know, that people perceive, and maintaining that balance between quality education and fiscal accountability. And you know, you don't want your taxpayers to feel as though they can't afford the education that they need to provide for their community and for their children. And I think that fiscal piece is gonna be ongoing for quite a long time. I don't think that's gonna disappear. I don't think we're gonna be out of this current economic state, probably, you know, I mean, you listen to different forecasters, but I think we're looking at 5, 6, maybe even a decade worth of years moving forward. And I think you also have a shift in how the wider society is viewing education in terms of entitlement, and the same thing around the Medicare, Medicaid piece. I mean, I think we're, you know, all of this in sort of the broader picture, and education has really sort of been in the last couple of years a huge target of a lot of, well, not just governors, but, you know, wider, but very broad discussion around how best to do it. And there's a lot of angst around the expansion of the charter school movement and the influx of foundation money, not just in charters, but to the Department of Education, and where all of that shakes out. And because included in this waiver, folks, and it doesn't apply to your schools because your schools do well, there are turnaround principles, and I think I've included in the packet some information. You know, there are focus schools and priority schools that actually allows a for-profit or not-for-profit educational organization to take over a public school, dismiss the staff, rehire a different principal. So there's a lot of things going on sort of in the broader educational community outside of Monroe, but that have an impact in terms of just that general conversation where people are really questioning the value of education and how it's delivered, and everyone seems to be an expert, which is interesting because very few people think they're an expert to tell General Motors how to produce a better car, right? Or tell Bank of America, you know, how to bank more effectively. In fact, we lent those people money to get out of the hole. So it's sort of an interesting paradigm when you look at it sort of in that broader scope. So I think those things fall under fiscal accountability, and facilities are pretty much tied. The technology and the fine arts, I think, may go very nicely sort of in that area of instruction, and maybe you don't see them that way, but I see technology as supportive of instruction. I see the fine arts as being in that broader sort of bucket. Typically when we talk to districts about setting district goals, we really urge that you not do or set more than 4 district goals in a given year. They may be multiple year goals, you may not achieve all of them, but more than that, you're sort of setting yourself up for spinning your wheels like that little hamster on a cage.
If you got 3, you can concentrate. If you got 6, you got a mishmash.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, 3 to 4 goals.
Balderdash.
He gave you a balderdash.
No, I said mishmash.
Not me.
I know.
I'm gonna ask all these tall people,
Awesome.
can you put this behind you?
23 skidoo.
You have to turn your head.
And
to
it's in
little
the Oxford English Dictionary.
Oh, I know.
So if you had to identify, and I'm going to ask administration first because they are your educational experts, where would you begin with goals for 2012 and 13? What would be your primary focus? What would you like to see the district focus on in terms of each of those priority areas?
I think the first thing we need to look at is developing a strategic plan that centers around those 6 key areas. And so in my mind, the strategic plan becomes our process for community engagement. And I'm very deliberate about using community engagement versus community involvement. And the reason I make that distinction is we often assign value when we say community involvement. If people aren't physically present, we take that to mean they're not interested. Oftentimes we can engage people and it doesn't mean they have to show up with cookies.
No.
No, brownies are okay too,
Helps them.
or muffins.
So those are the 6 goal focus areas. I just wrote it this way so you would know. When I send it all back to you, they'll be written out for the sake of reflections. Feedback on that.
Well, our facility, or our strategic plan, I think we did it in 2001, 2002. It was a 5-year plan. It's very outdated. So we need to know where we're going to be going in the next 5, 6, 7 years. So I think this is a very important piece.
But we should probably review where we are right now and look at that and say, what did we do right, and where have we had some problems? And it can give us some guidance, as instead of going on a pathway like this, we can go on a pathway like this.
Well, and typically, when you would do a strategic plan, you would look at the last one, see what was accomplished, see what didn't get done in that plan over those 5 years, even though it's pretty antiquated. And things really, I have to say, have changed so dramatically since 2006. We're in 2012. It's almost a dinosaur in terms of really even getting much out of it, other than to say, here's the process we used, was that process effective? But I think you're going to have to sort of start from square one. I mean, just because there have been so many changes. Marvin?
I think I can hit a few of those at one time. One, Dr. Hamilton doesn't agree with probably any of this. I would eliminate block scheduling. That would improve instruction because kids wouldn't be bored after a traditional 45, 42 minutes. By eliminating instruction, we would be able to set up the schedule so that we don't need every class every year. We can alternate years. That would affect budget. And scores should go up because by having a traditional schedule every day, kids are getting reinforcement instead of losing what they learned one day and skipping a day and then teacher coming back to what they know and going from there. So I think block scheduling is not the panacea that everybody says it is. I think we're lucky we have iPads because when kids are bored, they don't go crazy. They play with their iPads instead of doing what they should be doing.
Actually, he thinks I disagree. I actually agree that I disagree.
Negatives.
I agree that I disagree.
Oh, he is a slicker, Sam.
I have a couple of reflections on that, okay? When we do district goals, you want to look broadly district-wide. So if it is to review existing curricular programs and schedules to see if they can be improved, that would be a good goal. What you're talking about is a specific strategy, which is, and that's the administration's responsibility.
Yes, I know that.
Not yours. So, and I hear you. I mean, I actually agree with you. I think block scheduling was sold as a panacea, sort of like the open school concept. It had great popularity for a while, and then when we reflected on it, we went, oh, wait, maybe not so great. And there are a whole host of alternate kinds of high school schedules that can be implemented, rotating drop periods, that could be looked at that would ensure that you still had sufficient double block time for your APs perhaps, or for your science labs that are necessary for some of your upper level high school courses. But that's an administrative function.
I understand.
So I think if you want to develop a goal that talks about assessing particular programs, and I would look to you for the kind of language to that, to determine what stays, what goes, to your point, Ira, about does something need to come off the plate? If we're putting something else on the plate, are there better ways to make increasing efficiencies for students and their scheduling so that we can offer the elective programs every other year so kids would be able to, all of that I think probably makes good sense. But just for the board's benefit, it's administration's responsibility to develop an action plan to make these things happen. And you don't get to say yes or no to that. You will hold the superintendent accountable at his evaluation next April for progress toward or the achievement of these goals. Yes.
And that raised a fundamental issue. What's the role of a curriculum committee? Shouldn't that be a place where these things would be discussed? I mean, you just present flop a thing, or is the curriculum committee hearing reports from the assistant superintendent as to what's the progress of the evaluation. And so we have a group of people who are interested in curriculum, who can participate, provide insight, and bring their colleagues up to stuff, rather than have, boom, an atomic bomb dropped in their head and they got 2 days to decide yes or no.
Well, your district goals should drive the work of your committees, so that if you decided, for example, that developing a strategic plan was one of your district goals, if you have a community engagement committee, do you have, I don't know what your committee is.
No, we don't have a community engagement committee.
Okay, so the board might develop an ad hoc community engagement committee to work on the strategic planning process, helping to determine what that process is going to look like, making sure.
And then you have to have community involvement. We have that process, and that's why we want to probably look back at what we did in the past, and that's how provides a template for how to get broad agreement to
Well,
this going forward.
That's the point to doing the strategic plan, okay? But how would you frame this instructional goal, Ken, perhaps, that would encompass?
I do think we need to have a review, evaluation, and assessment of current instructional programs. Of current programs, not just instructional, the non-instructional as well.
Some of the things that we're talking about are structures versus curriculum and instruction.
So if I said programs and structures, would that
The structure,
help to-
the structure really talks to what Mr. Braverman said about block scheduling, and our learning academies, and all those are structures, and then underneath, is all the instruction and the curriculum that takes place.
This is pretty huge.
I was just getting ready to say that.
And I think we need to quantify it a little bit, because I would not want to be you next May.
Right.
Or April,
Not
when they
like the
said,
meeting next month.
oh, and that was, so.
Exactly.
While here.
This is a big chunk. It is definitely a multi-year piece, and it requires the allocation of resources for research and development.
Yes, it does. So what would you see, for example, in year one as being your focus? Because I want to help to sort of quantify this, if this is what you want to do, so that perhaps we could think year one, year two, and maybe even year three.
We almost need to identify all the programs that are in place, current and new and old, and then identify literally a schedule for what that review would look like. So for example, let's take one of our biggest initiatives right now, which is the one-on-one initiative with the iPads. We have an obligation to report our progress on that, to review, see how it's going, is it successful, what our benchmarks are, how do we determine success, what do we mean when we say success, are the iPads supposed to transform every kid into a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, or do we have some other benchmark along the way?
Can I sign up? All right. So we would envision that in 12, 13, we would identify a schedule for review.
Exactly.
And I would think it would not be too much to expect that at least one or two of those programs or structures would fall here.
Right.
In 2012-13, and somehow, perhaps the technology at first? I don't know, I'm asking. I don't want to.
I think that is because that has been such a focus and such a huge allocation of resources, even though it is one of the most recent pieces, it is also one of the most controversial.
Well, and that's why I sort of said it sort of hesitantly, but I think perhaps technology ought to fall in 2012 and 13. I mean, just for the sake of, do we need to continue and expand? Has it been successful? What does that look like? And you need the data to be able to make those decisions,
Right.
because you can't make them absent that. So you would look at technology in
Maybe identify the
2013,
data.
and is there any one other area. I mean, it would seem like you should be able to, I would think, look at technology and perhaps one other piece that is congruent or concomitant fairly easily. I don't know what that is, you need to tell me, but I would think. Wait, 1 second, Marvin.
All right. I think a review in the structures, so standard operating procedures within the structures, I think is a priority. The technology I'm hesitant on an assessment because we're gathering data and it's going to take at least 3 to 5 years to measure success rates on technology. So I felt that the technology piece would be umbrellaed into part of the strategic plan, like an educational technology committee with goals within that, and that would, as opposed to isolating it, because the district has a history of being a technology leader, and that's brought out lots of different stakeholders, and especially with the one-to-one initiative, we've seen both extremes and everything in between that. So I'm cautious about making that a priority goal, because it's what we're doing right now. We're collecting and doing data. To look at it, I guess, is okay as well. And then coupling what you said, if the technology is an instructional delivery system, to isolate it, how do you isolate it?
Well, it was a question from me. It's not certainly a direct, I wasn't trying to direct you in any way. I know that when I pick up the newspaper and I read the clips, those are the kinds of things that I've been reading about in your community, so I knew it was a concern. But please,
I think
whatever.
it's too important not to make it a priority. Now, we can talk about what that looks like, but the initiative is too big, too costly, and there are too many, it's under too much scrutiny, not for us to be as proactive as possible with reviewing, researching, and doing some sort of assessment, even if it's just identifying our benchmarks for determining. One of the things we have to talk about is we keep throwing this word around whether or not it's been successful. We haven't defined success.
Exactly, which is critical.
I think along with, in that review, we should be reviewing the way we employ staff in terms of the extra period, and we pay them extra for that extra period. But we fail to think about when they are free for that period, they can meet with students and do things that would be normal, that would enhance the student's day. And when we hire them to fill that free period, they can't do that. And theoretically, they're not doing lesson plans and other normal things that teachers do. So I think we have to look at the way we fill our teachers' schedule, staffing. Good thing.
And while I hear what you're saying, I would also think, just posit, and perhaps some of you who sat on negotiations can validate this, that's probably a contractual item. That
Yes, you're
the
correct.
sixth
However,
period at the high school, if they teach 5 and you add a 6th, they get a stipend.
yes, that's the contractual item, but in a community like this, probably the largest community of retired teachers outside of New York and Florida, they can hire somebody for 1 period a day.
And not pay benefits. I see what you're saying. Okay, so
I said that,
so I
2
think
years
that
ago.
goes to the structure.
I didn't hear you.
And
You weren't speaking into the microphone.
I think that falls under the structures and standard operating procedures of those, because that's a current common practice in a lot of schools. You simply assign somebody a 6th period.
I know that.
Yeah, and move on. So I think that's probably taken up in here for looking at that piece, because maybe there's a more fiscally efficient way. The only thing I would say to you, and this is, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a former high school teacher, so what I would say to you if I were paid a sixth period to teach, in addition to the 5, the one advantage that a current staff member has is they know the kids, they know the standard operating procedure of the building, and so hopefully instruction is at a higher level. It's not someone coming in who's only there 1 period a day, who doesn't know the kids, who doesn't have any continuity of program. Just a thought.
And just a thought, I'm also a former high school teacher, and I think that has to do with the level of instruction, the level of the class that they're filling into.
I know.
And, you know, there's an awful lot of intangibles there.
I know, I only threw that up because I didn't know that, so I just wanted to point that out
Thank
as
you.
board members. Just
I try to inform them of all these things.
Thank you.
Now, Gwen,
Yes.
one addition to that. My development has quite a few retired teachers, mostly from New York. And they come to me and they're willing to volunteer to tutor the students. No charge, no cost to us. They have the background. They could sit one-on-one, or in some cases, it need be,
Couple of kids.
a couple of kids to give added help to get these kids up to par. And evidently, we're not allowed to do it because I don't believe the union would allow it. Because you're basically taking a position away from a union member. I
Or a
don't think they would
potential
allow
new
it.
union member.
Yeah.
Well, I can't speak to that in terms of your structure and your union agreement, but if it's something that takes place after school hours, I'm not so sure that you couldn't in
Well,
some
that's
way.
after school, I'm talking during school.
During the school day?
Yes.
Okay, that, I can't speak to it. That, probably difficult to implement, but
Well, like
again,
you said, you know, and I didn't consider that, after school. If that makes it legal and we can do it, these people are willing to do it.
After,
be a great help.
after school would seem to not be a union issue, an association issue, if it's not done during the school day.
Yeah.
The concern then, of course, is how do you get the kids home, the transportation issue. I mean, all of those things can be worked out, but it's a perfect piece to come out of your strategic plan. And there's a resource in your community that you really could optimize with some planning and some effort. But again, there's a whole host of things that have to happen and a lot of administrative energy to go into that. So it's not something that's just, you know, they have to be fingerprinted and the background check, not to say they wouldn't pay, you know,
No,
I
you
get
have
that.
to do it.
But
Today
you
you
have
have
to
to do
do all of those pieces, so. All right, so are you comfortable with these 2 goals as a board? How do you?
Well, for number 2, I think we need to put a little more, like, something we can quantify at the end of the year.
Okay.
Some number, so when we look at and see whether it was achieved or not, you know?
I
Know what I
would
mean?
agree. Sometimes those find expression in the action plan, the measures of success. But if you want to build in some quantifiable numbers here, I don't have a problem.
I don't know what that would be, but, you know, because, like, number 1, it's gonna be, well, yes or no, did we do it? And number 2, you
Well,
know.
no, I think the deliverables here are complete a strategic plan.
Complete a
That
strategic
you'll
plan,
have in place perhaps a change to your mission statement, you'll have a list of fundamental community beliefs. No, I don't want to go down there.
Don't say that.
Yes, let's change the mission statement.
No, I don't want to change the
Let's
mission.
discuss that.
Do you know what I'm saying? But you'll have a whole plan with strategies, goals,
Or a timeline
strategies,
for-
and a
Where we're gonna-
timeline for that.
Right, where we're
Okay?
gonna go.
That's
So-
number 1, you're saying.
Yes, for
Okay.
number 1. So you'll have some really quantifiable deliverables you'll be able to see. And when you do an action plan, there'll be a timeline attached to that, so you'll be able to see it emerge over the course of the year, okay? For this, develop the schedule for review. I mean, there are all kinds of different deliverables that you could look at. You could look at the agendas from administrative meetings when these kinds of things are on their agendas and are taking place. You will actually, I would think, at the end of the day, be able to read a review of the technology program, look at the data that was collected, and all of those items would be outlined in Ken's, Dr. Hamilton's action plan with the dates that those things would be happening and available to you. So, you know, it's not a 5% increase but you will have deliverables with very specific outcomes, okay? All right, I think we need something that addresses, I hate to say this word out loud, the finance tax piece. And I think that's important, because I think that's an ongoing concern. At least half of the pieces that are on there back behind your two administrators list that as a concern. So where do you want to go with that in terms of a goal?
Mr. Klein?
I think,
Financial piece.
I think.
Well, let's talk
this-
about that, because I think that's really a very fruitful conversation to have, is our quest to identify a particular number by which we close adequacy, and then what are the barriers associated with that? Is our quest to work on creating the balance that we talked about earlier? Because if we say our goal is to reduce over adequacy spending, then we have to also look at what some of those hurdles are that we anticipate, a lot of which is unknown at this juncture, that may impede our ability to be successful with that, or diminish that window to some extent.
I would tell you I had a board that wanted to write a goal in June that said we would develop a budget that was at least 1.5% below the 2% cap. When they picked me up off the floor, I said, I have no idea why you would want to implement a goal that would so hamstring you as a district in being able to provide an education in an area where you don't know what funding is going to look like from the state. You don't have your testing scores back to be able to see where your kids are. You don't know what enrollment's going to look like, but it was too early in the year. So,
And we tried that, and we got our head handed to us when we used to have elections.
right.
And so I agree with Dr. Hamilton. We should go and set some broad things, and then the interaction between the bean counters and the curriculum guys, and step systematically and recognize, hey, this is not going to be a one-shot deal. It's going to be multi-year, and it's going to be hard pick and shovel labor, but it's got to be done. It's the only way we're ever going to go back to Yahtzee Thomas down in Trenton and say, okay, lady, we're at adequacy. Now, what in the name of hell are you going to do for us? We're looking for a $30 million check.
I think she's probably still not sitting there. I mean, because they shifted, it's a new crew, yes.
I more or less disagree with when you said that that district wanted to cut it 1% or 2%, that handcuffs you. I disagree with that. We're now at a point that we can't keep spending the way we're spending. Is it for the betterment of the children? Absolutely. But you're at a point now, and the surprise is as the economy is, between union negotiations and some of these new initiatives, there's no accounting as to who's going to pay for it and at what cost. What I'm saying is, if you said, now, we've already discussed cutting adequacy, getting back down to adequacy from over adequacy, and cutting that. Yes, that's part of it, but there are other areas that can be cut. And if we set a limit of, we want to see 1% a year for the next 3 years, above and beyond the adequacy cut, there may be subjects, there may be areas that we can cut. But we have to work, we can't keep allowing, and this had been said at some of the committee meetings, where some members said, well, now, and I voted against moving the election to November, because I personally feel that the taxpayers have a right to voice their opinion, knowing that in some cases it may mean nothing, but in most cases it does mean something, that it forces the township council to recommend cuts. But at least the residents have a voice. They have no voice now. And a couple of the members of the board had said, well, now, as long as we stay below the 2% cap, no problem. But it's not the 2% cap, it's all the other expenditures above and beyond the 2%.
Okay, let me just.
Mark, you and I need to sit down, and I'm going to take you through, because you're full of BS.
John?
That would be that balderdash.
No, it's
No,
far more,
no, no,
far
no, no,
barnyard.
no,
That was
okay.
awesome. Now we'll get into a meeting.
That's okay, I'll take care of it.
Okay. What I would suggest, and my problem
John?
was not with this board wanting to reduce by 1%, it was being so specific so early on without an analysis of how they were going to get there. So I think if you want to write a goal, it has to be around looking at where are those areas that will allow you to make good decisions, to maintain that balance between quality education and fiscal responsibility that in ways will least damage the programmatic offerings, to maintain that balance between quality education and the budget. So I think you need to do that systemically to look at your budget, but I think trying to say it has to be at 1% or it has to be at least, $1 million, or putting a number around it, it really sets you up for failure, where you just get to a point where you say, all right, we're at 600,000, we only need another 400,000, let's just make it here, without really an analysis of the kind of impact that has. So my point is not so much not to be doing those things, but to do it in a way that makes sense, that doesn't tie your hands or
Couldn't
have
you-
make decisions that aren't good.
Couldn't you add to that you take into account the consideration of the taxpayer without using a specific tax increase or decrease?
You know what, I'd like, well, let me let Mike talk and then, 'cause
Yeah,
that's his
just real
domain.
quick, and I'll be brief. And I want to clarify Mark's point here, because this is important, and it's come up a couple times. The tax levy cap takes your general fund levy from the preceding year, and it grows it by 2%. Included in there is salaries and benefits and everything else, so they are included and do eat up that growth of the 2%. Then on top of that, you're allowed a very small adjustment for pension, health insurance, and enrollment, but it's only a couple $100,000 at most.
They
two-
limit us on that. Is
two,
that
two,
correct?
300.
I thought it was unlimited.
No,
No,
absolutely
the
not.
waiver is
Counted
limited.
into it.
Absolutely not. It's a very, very small, almost negligible adjustment to the 2% cap. So we really are living within that 2% environment. But number two, I would just caution the board against setting some kind of benchmark or metric on adequacy or on the tax levy, because there's so many variables: enrollment, state aid, ratables, Jamesburg, all of which are out of our control. You could set a tax benchmark and have any one of those four really blow it out of the water.
Right. I think that's perfect segue into what I think maybe one of the things we want to focus on is developing a budget philosophy so that we have some sense. For instance, facilities is a big issue here. There is no way we're going to get to facilities in the manner in which we should without a referendum, which would be suicide, without establishing a philosophy around our budget. Are we going to, because if we say we're going to put $1 million in facilities, that $1 million has to come from someplace else if we're going to also work on not passing that on to taxpayers. So that means we can cut all the paper and books we want. We're not going to get to $1 million. You're talking about people at that point. When you're talking about people, you're talking about programs. So we need a philosophy. Mike and I, when we sit down and we start talking about this budget with principals, we need to know, are we saying, okay, instead of you having a class with 23 kids, you're going to have 25 kids, or you're going to have 26 kids in third grade or fourth grade, and what does that mean in terms of the workforce? That will get you $1 million. But you can't turn around and then say, when the association or parents start coming into the microphone, we don't want 26 kids in our classroom, and then say, well, you know what, we can't do that roof now because we're going to put those teachers back in. So that's why we need a philosophy around a framework for developing our budget process.
Okay, I think we're done now.
No,
But we got to
I have
get
a
that
couple of issues
framework
with
out
this
to the
conversation.
public, and we have to advertise that, and that's why I say, let's quit being punching bags. Let's get out and aggressively state, hey, we're a superior school system. We've got great academics, and we have been working with might and main to get the financial house to where we want to be, and quit the BS that's been going around here.
But, all right, now I have an issue. I'm sorry, I have an issue and it's killing me here. With what you just said, this discussion we're having, the first thing I have a problem with is we're talking about, let's get rid of our over-adequacy completely. in this perceived notion that the state's going to give us more money. But if they don't, now we have a generation of children that may not be up to par what we used to have. So the only thing that's doing is.
That's not so.
I think it is. But now you said in that statement that you're going to have all these great students and great programs, but you're also saying get rid of all the over-adequacy, get rid of the AP, right? That's
look.
gone. Get rid of the busing.
Wait, John,
Get rid of
let's
everything
give
else.
him a chance
So
to
I don't
speak.
think that's the direction. We don't want to have a mandate where let's get rid of all of our great programs, and maybe the state
John?
in 4 or 5 years might give us some money, and I think that's a problem. Now, that's the first thing I have a major problem with, that we're moving in that direction before we're even thinking about anything else. The second thing is we're ignoring a lot of what Mike was saying, these external influences we're having. We've got, in my development, we got another 400 units going in, right? And they're putting them in. They work 7 days a week in my development. They're putting in several a month. So we might, by the opening of the school year, right, might have another 6, 8, 10 kids. By Christmas, we might have 20, 30, 40 kids, which might mean another class. What do we do then? Do we cut more programs? We got to add a new teacher, right? But where do we get the money from? And we're not thinking about a lot of the external. How many more developments do we have? We have that another one going in on 130, right? 150 units, which the guy said like 6 kids or something are going to come from. There's no way in hell. I mean, you're going to have a load of kids. And we're not thinking about, and I think the philosophy is the way to do it. We can't say, cut it by X percent or do this or do that, when we might have 5 more developments going in, right? They're building that weird turnover there. They're putting another 10 or 15 houses over there. And these aren't one-bedroom houses. They're 4, 5, 6-bedroom houses. They're huge houses. Who has those houses? People with a lot of kids. You're not going to move to a development that's over adequacy and not have children, right, to move into these huge houses. And we're missing that point, I think, by pre-establishing what we're trying to do. You know, and to what Mike was saying, there's a lot of other variables, and we're not really thinking about it. The only thing we're really thinking about, and I'm not going after you, is we're thinking about let's cut back on all of our programs, and you a little bit, to save some more money, but it's the wrong way of thinking. Let's not think, let's cut.
I'm thinking.
No, let Mr. Masters
But
finish.
that's what's, it might not be, because in your second statement, you didn't say that, but that's what's coming across to me. Now, maybe because I have 4 kids going into the school district, 4.
4, and you got how many?
Me and him were almost the whole classroom.
I think the point is here, you as a board need to come to consensus around parameters for the development of the budget that is both reflective of your collective priorities and is responsible to the taxpayers and to the community. And I think that's where Ken was going, is that he needs clear direction from all of you. One of the parameters we used to have in my community, when in 10 years we had 4 referendums and we added, because we were getting 300 kids every year for 10 years, okay? One of our parameters for our budget was we would use every single piece of available space before we would ask the taxpayers to renovate a building, add on, or to build a new facility, okay? Because we needed to do that. We didn't feel that was a parameter for us for budget development and for referenda. We would not go out and ask until we had used, every available space. So small group instruction areas had to be fully utilized. Administration had to go into trailers so that we could use another building that they were using. Do you know what I'm saying? So having those things allows you to go out and talk to your community and say, here's how we've built this budget. We've put into place the following. We're not cutting quality programs, but we have looked at programs that are not fully utilized or under-enrolled. We've reduced those. That has led us to be able to reduce staffing in those areas by X. We've taken that staff and put them in Y. So I think you need, as a group, to really sit down and have a hard discussion around what is your philosophy as a board, and then provide your administration with support, because otherwise they're going to develop a budget, bring it to you, and you're all going to go in 36 different, or at least 9 different directions on it.
Gwen, I absolutely agree with you, and that's what I was saying about the interactions. More importantly, and I think Mr. Masters really hit a very vital point, we need to get a study going and figure out not the 5 years, but the 10 years, and take a median projection of projection and a max and say, what in the name of hell are we facing? We may have to have a Monroe Township South High School, just like West Windsor had to do. And
I'm gonna tell you, it's a little more emergent than that, because what Lou just described, we could conceivably have an issue mid-year.
That's a whole school.
Mid-year, we could have an issue and need more classrooms at the, and I have we can talk about how that could happen. We fortunately, with the opening of Applegarth, we have the capacity where we can begin to plan for needing to open more instructional space for students. But that's why this conversation is so important, because we will be in the middle of a budget and may conceivably, because of the way the closings are occurring on those homes, we may have to come up with resources that are not in our budget right now before
Next year's budget.
next year's budget.
Yes, one more second. Yes, Ira.
As part of, I think this budget philosophy is one of the most important things really we ever started talking about. Because, going back to reviewing programs and things like that, what I was talking about before, I don't think we should just cut programs just because of over adequacy. A lot of people move into Monroe because we provide these services. Because my child can do senior options and take culinary classes. I don't want to just go down a list and say that's over adequacy, let's just cut that. I think we need to, going back to number 2, review the programs and see maybe there are some things that aren't working and things that are, that we can cut, or maybe we can put off things for a few years until, the economic times gets better. But what Lou said, I personally feel we can cut it to adequacy all we want. I think it's Boulder Dash that the government's going to give us more money just because we cut all these above adequacy programs.
And it may
Praying
not
on that,
even-
I
It may not
think it's a
even
wrong
be that
philosophy.
formula
Yeah.
by April of next year.
I think it's a wrong philosophy for this district to take because
Exactly.
people move into Monroe. I moved into Monroe because of the school system and before all these programs that my kids have an opportunity to take a lot on that list.
On that
And a lot
list.
on that, not on
So
that
it goes
list.
back to that balance that we have over here that someone spoke about. How do we maintain quality programs
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, be fiscally efficient and good stewards and pinch every nickel and dime to make sure it's well
Which
spent?
we have to, and it's a delicate balance. We
It
want to
is
address the
that
taxpayers'
balance.
issues that we hear, and we want to also, for every person that complains about the tax increase, I'm sure we're going to get another person saying, well, I want this program, don't cut this. So it's a very delicate balance.
Amy, did you
I
want to say something? Because I know you had your hand
I
up.
cut you off.
Yeah, let me just go here and then I'll get back.
It'll come around.
One of the comments I said earlier was the move from rural to suburban and the enormous growth in our district. Along with that, I've been here 16 years, so I have not the whole picture of the Monroe history, but a pretty good piece. The amount of subgroups that we now engage in 2012 is more than I've ever felt, but exponentially. So having a budget philosophy would then guide our decision-making, because every subgroup has valid concerns, and they really wants, and they're all very valuable. But when you have 100 subgroups, and I'm not being short with that number, how do you meet all those needs? And what happens is the splintering, we're seeing some splintering, because we all are so vested in doing what's right
For everybody.
for everybody.
Well, if
And
you
how-
asked the 10 board members on this board, we would each have something that we want to see in the budget, something that we don't have, and I would guarantee that it's all different, 10 different opinions.
So if we asked what the philosophy is now to each person, you would get, I would assume, very different answers.
I think that's-
But you're going to have to come
Exactly.
to consensus around at least those big chunk items and really live with them for a while. And I would tell you from a governance perspective, once you come to consensus around that, then all of you have an obligation to really support the budget and to communicate. I think it's more important now than ever, since the vote is no longer available to your community, right, wrong, or otherwise. That's the reality. I think it's more important now than ever to be communicating the impact of that budget, the good things that are going to happen for the school, what the impact is going to be for the, the average assessed home and whatever. I think it's more critical than ever because we need the support of our communities to be successful. So even while they're not voting, I think getting that information out to them is critically important. And you are, in large part, representatives of all of your different, you all have different constituencies. You know, you may be a grandparent, you may be, you know, an elementary, middle school parent, you may be a high school band parent. So you all know different people in the community and different constituencies. You need to be talking to them about the good things that are taking place and the impact on the budget. So, but you have to be speaking from the same page, or you're going to have board meetings where people come and say, we didn't know you were eliminating this and the board caves. And that can't happen. And if you had a firm budget philosophy and a consensus around this is the way we want to go, it makes those no's a lot easier to say to a group of people that you know and like and would love to help, but just can't.
I think we have to.
I think one thing that, you know, one of the things that's very important here to keep in mind is just a long-term picture and where we've come from. My family has been here for 100 years. They were farmers here, and my great-grandparents moved here from Italy. My grandmother actually went to school in Jamesburg. My father went to school in Jamesburg. We didn't even have a school system in Monroe. The one thing that I think we have to be mindful of is that any deep cuts, anything that we're looking for that's going to really impact our offerings and our standing, I think we also have to be able to let the homeowners, whether they're senior citizens or new families, understand that part of the reason why we haven't experienced the collapse in housing values that other parts of the state and nation have is because we have a good school system and we're still attractive. And when we get to the point where we're cutting things just for the sake of cutting things, we're not going to be as attractive. Those home values are going to slide. And
Go in the toilet. Yes, Amy,
And-
and then I'll get to you.
And again, if we go in and say, oh, let's just cut $2 million out of the budget, the impact could really hurt children. I think it's better to do a review of the programs, the entire board, and then go out to the public and say, look, we are being fiscally responsible. We've looked at this program, we know some of you will be impacted, but it's not working for us. There's not enough kids. It's costing too much. And I think in that way that when we present it to the public that way, and I would also like to say the person who stood up and said, you know, you have terrible schools is not a reflection of this community. And I was telling Dr. Hamilton, I just had a meeting with a high-level person from Verizon about, you know, some issue at work, and he said to me, oh, you said you were on the school board? I said, yeah. He says, you know, my brother moved here 3 years ago only for the school district. That's all he moved here for, right? And I think that person is, the people who love the school district don't come out. They don't, just the, so I think we shouldn't focus on the one person.
No, because
who
it was
stood
a
here.
personal issue. It's not
Exactly,
a
who said
a
this is a bad
district issue.
district, and not focus on it. Let the comment go, because if it was that bad, where's the other 6,000, you know, parents of our
I agree
students?
with
We're
you.
the 39,000 citizens. That's, remember, you got to keep that in mind. The other thing is this, that I think Amy is absolutely right, but I would suggest one thing. Let's identify 3 or 4 big mules that are major programs, and what we are doing with the big mules, and that we can talk about, and the public can understand it. Don't get into the weeds and talk about this 400,000 or this 200,000. Let's talk in blocks of nothing less than 5 million. And that way you can go and get the people's attention, and don't clutter it up. Keep it less than a half a dozen, better yet, maybe 3.
Yes. Mark, sorry.
Something that's been said at the meetings, and I've said it, is I truly believe, and I think all of us in the room believe the same thing, we can cut everything down to adequacy, and the state is still going to put the screws to us and not give us some money.
Yes.
It hurts to
We
have
don't
to
know.
cut, for instance, the
It's
busing.
an unknown.
Why should we have to cut, forget 0-period busing, the 4:30 busing, the late busing? Why should we have to cut that? It's over adequacy. Well, let me tell you something. The state can go scratch. I think that where we're over adequate, and it is for a good reason, whether it be the AP courses, special courses and special ed, whatever it may be, the hell with the state, we stick with what we're doing. What Amy said, which is what
I really meant to say is the fact that go through all our offerings.
Right.
See what we don't need. Don't just every year come out, well, we're gonna offer this year, and this is gonna be new. So we should go through that as a board, as a whole, and say, look, we don't need this, we don't need this, we do need this, and tailor it that way and save that way. I don't wanna see us cut because we're over adequacy, because we're never gonna get more money from the state anyway. All we're showing as the state is that we were over adequacy, we're wasting all that money, and here we're adequate like they want, but you're not getting these kids to reach.
That's not adequate. That's way above adequate. I hate that word. Why would you want to be a board member of a school district that was only adequate?
Right, exactly.
Okay?
Why would you want to live here if you were?
Or be like Old Bridge, under adequacy, you get 45
You
million.
live here for a reason, and you stay here for a reason. And one of those major reasons, I'm sure for most of you, if not all of you, is because the quality of the school system. You need to maintain that quality, but you need to be accountable.
And right now,
you need to be fiscally responsible.
I operate under the premise, we operate under the premise that our goal is to maintain a quality school district that exceeds that standard.
Yeah.
That's that in my mind, that has been my marching orders. But I am now sensing different marching orders because the focus has been more on respond to the financial burden on the public, which I get. But they're like this.
Okay, and that's why having this discussion and figuring out where that balance is for this board is so critical. And I think looking at your programs, your structures, and saying, you know, where are there, if there are any left, because I think you've probably already put into place as many fiscal efficiencies, refinancing the bonds, sharing services, reducing transportation. I mean, those things have been happening routinely in school districts because you had no choice for several years. You get to a place where there's nothing left or very little left. It's sort of that fluff that begins to cut into the heart and soul, or if you want to think about it as the bone of the fundamental core of your program. And so how do you and where do you make those choices? And I think that's what you're talking about. You need that guidance and direction. And someone before talked about committees. You know, this needs to come out of the Curriculum and Instruction Committee, this needs to come out of the Facilities Committee, this needs to come out of the Finance Committee. This alone should drive your work all year long till budget time, so that you can provide that clear kind of direction, because for the whole board to sit and do the whole budget in every area at one time, to really then have a full board discussion with the work done in committee to say, here's where we think that balance is. And to provide those, I hate to use the word marching orders, but marching orders for development of the budget. There's no point in having your administrative team develop a budget that comes back to the board and the board goes, no, that's not what we mean at all.
I think if we're successful with that number 3, a lot of the waffling that Amy just described and Kathy just described wouldn't exist.
That's what I mean.
Because we would be on the same page.
Now, if I can just add one thing, and Michael can tell me if I'm right or wrong. Is it correct that for every $750,000 that we either spend or save, it equates to 1 cent?
Correct.
Tax
That's
levy?
approximately correct.
So, in other words, to make it where it's viable, where it's noticeable, you're talking large cuts, large savings. You know, and I'm not shooting down the 1 cent, because whatever we could save, I don't care if they can save $20 a year, at least we show we're saving something, but we have to keep in mind that for every $750,000 that we spend, that's 1 cent added to your tax levy, and then on the other way is every $750,000 we're able to save in underused programs or other ways of consolidating, that means a 1 cent cut. And, you know, it starts to add up.
And
that has to be in the back of our mind.
That's significant too, because a penny's worth a lot of money in Monroe. And other places, a penny worth $50,000, well, you can knock that out and people would really feel that and see that, and that wouldn't be significant. But our challenge in Monroe is the fact that the value of a penny is so much in comparison that it takes a lot to make any significant impact on
To
taxpayers.
make a dent, that they're
Right.
actually going to be able to see and feel. You know, you're talking millions of dollars to get to 15 or 20 bucks, okay?
Right.
And that's, and I don't mean any disrespect, that's a large pizza and a 2-liter bottle of soda. For most parents, that's not a lot to ask them to give up to maintain quality programs for their kids. I know people on fixed incomes, 20 bucks is 20 bucks, and it's important, I'm not saying it's not, but you're looking at cutting out real programs at that level, and for most people, it's okay, we'll eat one less grandfather's pizza, you know?
Yeah, but you're talking parents now.
I know.
Remember, we have 50%.
That's what I said.
And that,
People on
they
fixed
feel all
income.
that.
It's a lot, yes.
We could begin on this cut conversation by really establishing a critical value assessment for all of the programs that we have here, by reviewing the performance and effectiveness of every layer of these different programs that we have. Is this measuring up to what it was expected to do? It's costing X, should we reconsider this? And take that through the whole spectrum of our offering.
Well, that's what 2 is.
And that's really what two is about, so that you will have the information to be able to make intelligent
But
decisions.
I want to be careful about something as we have this conversation. Number 2 is going to take a long time. Number 3 needs to happen immediately. So you're not going to have all the data from number 2 to be able to completely inform number 3. So number 3, this philosophy almost has to happen with part of the data you need in order to make that decision, understanding that you won't have the full picture. There's no way we could assess and evaluate every program by the time we start our budget season.
That's why you want to go for the big mules.
Right. That's exactly why.
Okay. Need a fourth, yeah.
Actually, yeah, just to add on what you said, Ken, going to number 2, though, I'm sure you guys have a feeling of there may be some programs and things like that to take a look at first, and priorities. So, you can maybe start with those things that, I'm sure you have an idea of.
Those are the big mules.
Got the big mules, or even smaller mules.
I was going to
that
say,
you
sometimes
know,
the smaller mules
maybe
add up and you
sometimes the
get 2 or
smaller
3 of
mules
them.
are, are
become
things
one big-
that
What do you call
may
a
not be.
small mule? A baby mule, what's the,
Under 5 million bucks.
It's a mulette.
mulette?
That's what, we'll let you guys do that.
Johnson and Kurtzworth.
Mules are sexless.
I don't want that on TV.
Yeah,
Too late.
When,
Yes.
Wouldn't it be wise, and I don't know whether Dr. Hamilton's done it already, and I'm sure he has, but pinpointing, let's call it a winning program, a winning district that seems to be doing everything by the numbers, everything properly, and getting their background as to product offerings, perhaps what they offer versus what we offer. Are we missing something that we should offer, and are we offering something we shouldn't? What gets me is we have a fabulous, at the high school, a fabulous offering of electives. And I complained a lot about these high school students, 12th graders, cutting classes, and I really took offense to it because it wasn't once or twice, it was 3 times, 5 times, 8 times, 10 times. And when I had a meeting with the principal of the high school and the assistant principals, I was told that in order to fill their periods for the day, they had to take electives. Because my bone of contention was, if you take an elective, why are you cutting it? You picked it. So is it that maybe we don't need all these electives if they're only using it to fill out their schedule? And yes, there are things that I wish I could take, studio, camera, producing. I'd give my eye teeth for that when I went to high school if they offered that. So could we identify a couple of districts that perhaps yourself and Dr. Gorman can visit and try to get a background as to what they're offering?
I think people are coming to us to see what we're offering.
We saw that, but that's the problem. We saw that. They come here, but yet we're being penalized.
There's another anomaly in Monroe that we can't forget. The district is not that old in terms of its growth.
Right.
There's two mortgages essentially you're carrying for Oak Tree and this high school.
Right.
That is a big part of what people are feeling publicly.
Debt service.
So, right, so we can't underestimate that's not going away. So when we look at our over adequacy isn't just because of all this stuff. It's a lot of it is just growing pains that happen that have caught up with us.
But the state-
1998 was when we started the hockey stick. And even, we were growing 1% to 3%, and Jeff can verify that. And then 1998, we skyrocketed, growing at 10% per year. We lived through capacity. We lost the first referendum. The second referendum came. Then we had to start going into trailers because of 4 years and 4 days of Prohaska and Arminio and all the rest of those dirtbags.
Oh, John, we're on TV. We're
Who
still
cost
on
us
TV.
$42 million extra, $1 million a month almost.
Yeah, but we can't go backwards.
No, but that's
I know,
exactly
I
the point that
understand.
Dr. Hamilton's making. Those are anchors on our neck, and we're gonna, if Lou Masters is right, and I think he is, we're gonna be facing a couple of more anchors around our neck.
Well, then that comes to a goal that I think is important, which would be our facilities. Maintaining them, because if we don't start maintaining them, it's gonna cost us more down the road, and where are we going to house our students?
We have to plan ahead. We have to start to think about expansion
Yeah.
of the facilities.
Well, I think that will come out of your strategic plan, very specific goals around looking at projected demographics and enrollment, looking at what are we going to do with our facilities, I think that encompasses that, and I would agree with you. And I know that for years, especially in these tight economics times, a lot of boards have said, okay, instead of cutting teachers, we'll postpone the roof and patch over 3 spots. We won't rekey the building even though it's not as secure as we'd like because we need busing to somewhere. I mean, typically, it's been the easiest place with the least amount of impact on kids, facilities, maintenance, and maintenance pieces. And someone talked about the turf. That has to be addressed as well, and that's a huge chunk of change, I'm sure.
But it's the Fram commercial, pay me now or pay me later, and you pay a hell of a lot later.
Gwen, there's just one piece I want to put in here, and I think honestly, these 3 goals are lofty enough that I would be comfortable as a superintendent saying, this is a plate full.
Right on.
But this strategic, we can't not have something on these goals that speak to instruction.
I know.
So even if we look at the number 1, for example, to develop a strategic plan around key areas to engage the community.
And maintain instructional,
Integrity.
yes, that's the word.
English
Better
language.
Maintain
Excellence.
instructional integrity. Or excellence even, I like that word.
That's excellent.
I would
I
say,
would prefer excellence
It
to
is
integrity.
yes, I like
Integrity
excellence.
can just be whole, that doesn't mean it's excellent.
It's excellent.
And I would say, so I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but from my perspective, this is enough work to keep.
And administration's done,
Yeah.
I know.
But the point is,
Anything
you got
else, that's
3.
probably worse.
And if we concentrate our efforts on the big mules, those 5 million and up packages, then we can have talking points to the public. We can talk with some degree of specificity, but not complete, and recognize, hey, we're living with the state playing the 3-card Monte game. And it's always with what, 2 days notice, Mike, or 3 days notice?
2 days notice.
But hey, we can live with that, but we can give broad outlines and demonstrate to the people that, hey, this is an excellent school district, we have got good administration, and we're communicating to you, and here's things in a broad outline. Don't ask us for Johnny Jones's bus route or anything like that. That's you work it out with the principal or the transportation department. But we want to go out and get the public on our side, because right now, we got a lot of balderdash out there, and it's going on television, and it's dead wrong.
Are you comfortable with these as a board? I do think these are rather ambitious and broadly based enough to keep your administration working very diligently.
Gwen, can we just make sure we get a consensus check
Yes.
on this?
Yes, I'm just going to go around the room. Marvin, are you comfortable that these are?
Yeah, I think Dr. Hamilton is correct. I think number 3 has to be done immediately. I'd like to see an outline for number 2 and some kind of a timeline.
Lou?
2 has me nervous. I think that's a little, yeah, that one's the only one that I think is out there. But if you guys are up to it, I mean, it's
It's big.
And if we pick a subset, I guess as long as the subset spans different areas.
That's really what I was trying to do a little bit here, was to give you some idea of the subset, and maybe what Ken could put together when he has time to do this, not today, obviously, but is to sort of look at the whole piece and say, okay, for, 12, 13, I anticipate this, here's what I'm projecting for 14 out years. Do you know, so then you would get a little more of a structure, and then the board would be more comfortable, because this is huge. But it's a multi-year goal. You're not going to get it all in 1 year.
I don't think you're ever going to get it, because I think you're going to be adding programs and changing programs. It's just going
Well,
to
it's sort
go
of
on
ongoing.
and on.
It's ongoing. Improving student instruction and achievement is ongoing. It'll look differently year to year.
Continuous improvement process, that's what you have to
It is
recognize.
continuous. It is about continuous improvement, and so it'll look differently every year. Ira?
Yeah, I agree. Two, something that has to be ongoing, and maybe a timeline, a rotating timeline, a multi-year timeline, a reviewing program, so we know, this year we're gonna look at this year we're gonna look at that, and then maybe a
So it's like a
5-year
5-year
rotating timeline, or something like that. I think that has to be ongoing pretty much forever, and 3 is, something we definitely have to do immediately and start talking about it as soon as we can. So, but yes, I'm comfortable with all these.
Yeah, I do, I agree with them. I think it's come time that we do need to review programs, and, especially number 3, about a budget philosophy, that once we make the budget, we have to stick to it.
Live with it.
And I think that that's really a very key, and promote it,
Yeah.
Ken?
Ken, I'm sorry.
I'm good, I agree. I think, I agree with what everybody's saying about the need to, we have people that are on fixed budgets, and we have to, as members of, part of our community, and we have to keep those people in mind, but at the same time, we're tasked with running or making policy so that the administrators can run our school district, and our focus has to be on the children and what's best for the children. And I know that's become cliche, and people use that to attack us. Oh, yeah, it's always for the children. It's always for the children, and that's just another way for us to make an excuse to spend more money. But the truth of the matter is that I think for everyone that I know on this board, that it is about the children, and that's really where we need to focus. So I think that to Amy's point, and everyone else's, we need to look at where there's fluff, and we need to look at where we've cut, and we have to really be mindful about our spending, but at the same time, we don't want to gouge our school district to the point where we're not adequate anymore, or we're not a top school district, and we don't want to fall behind. And I think that's a slippery slope. Then housing values go down, and one thing just leads to another, and now we're subpar all the way around.
Don't disagree. Mark?
Few things. Number one, I feel that all 3 are almost intertwined. They work along with one another. What we do, whatever the plan is, should be ongoing, which somebody else had said. You're not going to do it all in 1 year. The residents don't expect you to do it in 1 year. But if we could work on each aspect of it, set a specific goal, whether it be an amount, whether it be programs, for each year. I mean, you're not going to cut everything, you're not going to add everything at one time. Number 2 is very broad. I think that we can work on that by subdividing it into specific categories, and then setting, well, whatever the categories are, well, let's try to do this the first year. Let's try to do this the second year, planning ahead. As far as facilities, the same way, and this is something John brought up at many meetings when he was calmer, and that was that
with all the building that's going on and all these planned communities, and I let everybody here know, you probably have, counting the two Salo communities, the conversion communities, you probably have 5 major communities going in. And I'm not talking about an area like around the corner for me, it's gonna be 8 homes, or it's gonna be, I'm talking about 200 families, 150 families, yours is gonna be another 400 families. And where is the corridor for these buildings? Apple, Garth, and Oak Tree. That's where all this building is going on, that's where all your development is gonna be. So this is something that we must start to plan, where can we expand without having to build a new school? And that's what it's gonna come down to, is it's gonna come down to a new school. So that's on that part. So number 2, subdivided, and I think we all agree on that. Number 1, very, very important, and we've discussed this a few times, and I discussed it with Dr. Hamilton. More important now than ever before is, let's talk adult communities first and then families. Adult communities, again, you're talking about probably 50% of Monroe are adult communities. All, if not most, have their own community newspaper. We must, whether we have Dr. Hamilton do it or we have the president of the board, whoever it may be, do it, is an article written each month about what transpired at a meeting, whether it's something we want to add, whether it's something we want to subtract. Nothing about, problems, personnel problems or any of that, but just what's going on. Here we saved, Michael was able to renegotiate the bonds and saved us $4 million in the life. This is what they want to hear, and unfortunately, it's not getting to them. When parents come here and speak, oh, I didn't know about the funding issue, give me a break. Somebody got up here and spoke and said they live here, what was it, 18 years? 20 years, never attended a meeting. Yet they come out here and they're ready to shoot down everything that's done on the board. And, I walked out of here sometimes and, jokingly I said, next time I come in, I'm going to put a target on my back. Because everybody here, in their own right and their own way, want to do the right thing. Sure. So even though we may differ on how the money is spent in some aspects, we all are for the same thing. I have no children in the school district. My grandkids aren't in the school district, but I try to treat this school district as I would do in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where one of my daughters live, and Manalapan, where my other daughter lives. You want what's best for the kids. You don't want the kids going out after they graduate high school with their 2 arms tied behind their back, and they can't get a job. And for the state to force us to bring down the level of education, shame on them. So I like what we have here. I think that we all can work together as a team. As a team, that's very important. As a team. We're not looking to give Dr. Hamilton a hard time. Jeff Gorman's a different story. We do want to give him a hard time. But everybody wants to do the same thing. No, but you got to do me a favor. Would somebody stop my car before I go out? But anyway, I go along with what you have there. I think we have something really to work on.
All right, thank you. John?
I'm going to be very brief. Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome.
This is a first.
Make a motion for standing ovation.
Yes, I agree too, because I think the strategic plan in itself could take almost a year for us to come up with what we want to do in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm not willing, and I'm sure nobody else is willing, to settle for us just being adequate. I think we need to continue what we do here, because everybody comes to us because of what we have to offer. So I think 2 and 3, 3 in itself is something we have to start probably in September, because our budget cycle starts in October. So that's something that this board as a whole, at a public meeting, needs to have that conversation. So I think they're pretty good, lofty goals for us.
You know then that the next step, and all of this is in your packet, is that your superintendent is going to develop action plans you should obviously adopt your goals. I would recommend your first meeting in September, mostly because then your community is back from the beach, and I mean that figuratively. I know they're not all at the beach, but people start paying attention once again to what's going on in education when they may not have been, given summer. I know I don't in summer. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Typically, the next piece would be to develop board goals. But you haven't yet done your self-evaluation, so my recommendation to your board would be to go online if you would like, complete your self-evaluation, and then I would be delighted to come back before a regular meeting for half an hour or so and just review that with you, perhaps and identify a board goal for the year. My recommendation, obviously, to align with this would probably be to continue to engage your community in some fashion, because I think that is a really appropriate role for your board. I think it's an ongoing one that boards need to be cognizant of and continue to work toward. But questions? You did this, yes.
Just a quick comment. I like the idea you have to put those goals on the agenda of every meeting. So I guess whoever prints up the agenda, we have our vision statement, our mission statement. It's a good idea for us and then the community to see where we're going to be focused on for the year, so they know, what's going on.
And I do think that it does help board members as you're going through to just stay focused around your board goals. So, thank you very much. I will get all of this back to you in a memo. It may take me a little bit of time.
Right away, you cost us more money. Now we got to go wash the 2 tables.
I know. Thank you very much. If you have questions.
I want to thank you, and again.
Thank you. Very good
condolences to
conversation.
you and the entire board for my lateness.
Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Thank you.
You're home
Hey,
in
no, we're
time
still-
for
we're
your
still in the
breakfast
meeting.
buffet.
We're still in the meeting.
We're still session.
Still at a meeting.
Thank you, Gwen, for
that's
being
it.
with us and
My
helping us
pleasure.
through this process.
We get overtime?
No, I'm still,
Thanks to
we're
Dr.
still in the
Hamilton for
meeting.
calling this meeting.
No, we're still.
Thank you.
Yes, we're still in the meeting.
Have an agenda? Do you want me, can I dismantle it?
The agenda is very quick. The rest of the agenda.
It's recycled.
Okay.
Public forum.
Public forum, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak?
Come on.
Wait in line. There's 5 guys ahead of you.
Please
Do I need
state-
the microphone?
Yeah, no, please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Robert Zarneski, Gatsmore Avenue in Jamesburg. I would like to,
Please speak into.
Speak in the microphone.
okay,
Take it out.
Walk around.
there you go.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay. What I'd like to do is commend you all on what you did here today. I think it's very admirable. Most of you came out for this meeting and setting forth in your goals. I like the fact that you are going to look into engaging the public a little bit more. I think it's very important. In Jamesburg, we've been trying to do that, and it's a difficult task to overcome. Also, I'd like to do, I had a brief conversation at this end of the table to enlighten the board members on this side. The housing developments that are going up, Spotswood and Halmetta engaged with the community along with the town councils and push the developers to give them money towards the schools. And that, I think, is a big obstacle that has to be overcome, and I think it's very easily done by just communicating with the town council and the mayor and the zoning boards and planning boards in order to engage the developers and tell them, you're not getting this pushed through as easily as you think without taking into consideration the impact on the school systems, which I understand is sitting here today is going to be a big problem for you. That's all. Thank you.
Is there, John?
How do you spell your last name?
Is there anyone else from the public? Seeing no one, our next scheduled Public Board of Education meeting, Wednesday, September 12th, 2012, 7:00 PM at the high school. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Kathy, if I could just make a comment, please, before we close out. I want to thank the board for coming out. I know it was a bit of an indulgence on your lives to ask you to come out on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, but I really appreciate that. I think this was a very, very good conversation. And I do ask the board, as we move forward, that you help me focus on these goals. And what I mean by that is, once the board formally adopts these goals and we flesh them out, It's really important for us to work in unison to avoid the distractions from these goals. And we spent, I think oftentimes administration gets derailed by spending a lot of times on things that are not really consistent with our direction. And hopefully this conversation and the development of these goals will help us create some harmony around moving the district forward in unison and accomplishing the things that I know we all have in mind, and that is to be responsive to our community, work together for the sake of our kids and our staffs, and make sure that Monroe continues to be the kind of place where people want to live and where kids want to grow and become productive citizens, and that we concentrate on modeling the kinds of behaviors we want from our children by being democratic and civil at all times.
Agreed.
After we
Mr.
adjourn,
Leary?
I'd like to make a statement, but I don't want to make the statement on tape.
Hey, Mr. Tesler, you made a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, yeah.
Second by Mr. Klein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, meeting has been adjourned.